Chapter 2475. This voice seemed to come from the boundless sky. It was light and heavy, carrying endless pressure as it descended. At this moment, the entire illusory god palace was silent. Only her voice could be heard. Every living thing was shocked. It was an interrogation, and a supreme honor that had finally returned. Countless pairs of eyes stared blankly at the woman in red standing in the flames. It was a slender and exquisite figure, but it contained shocking power and pressure that made people not dare to look directly at her. At the same time, a question appeared in everyone's mind. What exactly did she mean by that? The position of the Divine Master. Who was she asking about? Who was she? At the same time, the illusory god palace was also in dead silence. Dugu Mobao suddenly opened his eyes and looked ahead. Lan Shao also flipped over and stood up. He stared fixedly at that figure, and there seemed to be something surging in his eyes. All the god envoys were stunned. Chu Liuyue's question was about the Divine Master. Someone couldn't help but turn around and look at the figure in the deepest part of the illusory god palace. After a moment, that low and hoarse voice finally sounded. This seat was originally mine. How can it be enough? Really? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. Her eyes were like obsidian, cold and heavy. Silence reigned all around. She suddenly raised her eyes and looked at the pantheon record floating above the main palace. The totem between her eyebrows became clearer and brighter. Then, she said, the eighth god envoy. Everyone was stunned. Why did she call out to Xu Jing at this time? Xu Jing, who was lying on the ground in front of the illusory god palace and dying, was also shocked when she heard that. She instinctively looked up. However, Chu Liuyue's eyes weren't looking at her. Boom! A bright golden light suddenly exploded on the pantheon record. Instantly, it was as if fireworks had been set off. In the next moment, a name was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. It was as if the fog had finally been pushed aside. That layer of blurry boundary suddenly disappeared along with her chant. It was like a god's order, like a summon. Little Hachi. Everyone widened their eyes in horror and looked at the name that suddenly appeared on the pantheon record in disbelief. Little Hachi? She had clearly failed in her attempt to ascend to the heavens and break through to the divinity realm. No. Her name had long existed in the pantheon record. At the same time, Little Hachi, who was in the main hall, suddenly regained her senses. It was as if a thin layer of ice had been shattered in an instant, as endless waves surged out from within. A brilliant light emerged from between her brows. That was also a bloodline totem. Upon seeing this scene, Fan Yunxiao and the others were all shocked. Little Hachi actually had the power of a bloodline. Then, Lil 8 blinked her beautiful eyes and her body moved, disappearing on the spot. In the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of Chu Liyue. A smile appeared on her bright and charming face. Little Hachi, please forgive me for coming late. Her appearance was clearly the same as before, but her enchanting charm was even more flourishing than before. Just by standing there, she could easily steal everyone's line of sight. She was like a rose blooming in the best season, with a strong fragrance. Everyone took a while to react before they realized what had happened. The eighth divine envoy that Chu Liyue had called out was her. As if to verify their guesses, Chu Liyue said indifferently, Herb Mountain hasn't been properly taken care of for a long time. Little Hachi's eyes curved into crescents. I'll go now. As she spoke, her feet moved, bringing a gust of fragrant wind with her as she headed straight for Herb Mountain. Xu Jing was suddenly alarmed. You! What were they planning to do? Little Hachi suddenly stopped and looked back. Ah, I almost forgot that there was still you. She blinked her beautiful eyes. Then, with a gentle wave of her fair and soft hand, the broken jade beads on her wrist jingled. Xu Jing's figure flew up uncontrollably. Little Hachi was very fast. In a few breaths' time, she had already arrived at Herb Mountain. Then, with a thought, Xu Jing's body seemed to be ruthlessly thrown out by an invisible force. She landed heavily on a mountain peak. Then, she rolled down from the top and fell into the stream below with a plop. Pfft! Xu Jing's face turned even paler. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Little Hachi stood in the air with her arms crossed. She tilted her head and sized her up. Then, she snorted softly. Look at what you've done to my medicinal mountain. Look at what you've ruined. Hearing this, Xu Jing's mind was shaken. This herb mountain clearly belonged to her. When did it become Little Hachi's? She raised her head with difficulty. Her eyes were full of resentment. Little Hachi's gaze shifted slightly. She seemed to have seen something. Her red lips curled up, and she smiled. Big brother knows me the best. Xu Jing subconsciously followed her line of sight, but was suddenly stunned. Not far away, that faintly green barrier had appeared at some point. Moreover, it was different from its appearance in the past, which was always faintly discernible. This time, it had completely appeared. This barrier seemed to have fallen from the sky. Countless streams of light flickered on it. It was clear and magnificent. Accompanying it was a tyrannical aura that could not be ignored. With that, Little Hachi waved her hand. A gust of wind seemed to blow past, stirring the barrier. In the next moment, the barrier suddenly dissipated. It transformed into countless streams of light that scattered over the entire Herb Mountain. Abundant and vigorous vitality poured out like a torrent that had been opened in an instant. On the continuous mountain peaks, withered leaves fell. Young leaves grew. Countless branches, leaves, and petals swayed along with them. The rich medicinal fragrance wafted out from afar. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere of the entire Herb Mountain seemed to have changed completely. From the previous silence, it was full of vitality. Xu Jing's pupils suddenly shrank. In these 10,000 years, Herb Mountain did not seem to have changed much on the surface. However, only she knew that the various heavenly treasures on the mountain had actually been decreasing. Herb Mountain was originally very suitable for the growth of various herbs. However, as time passed, for some reason, it became more and more unsatisfactory. Although she had put in a lot of effort to take care of it, there were always some herbs that had withered and declined before they could grow. Even if some of them had grown, they were not as good as before. This was also part of the reason why she had strictly watched over Herb Mountain. However, because Herb Mountain occupied a vast area, not many people had noticed it. Xu Jing was very clear that all of this was because of that strange barrier. Every time it appeared, the vitality and the energy of heaven and earth in Herb Mountain would be reduced. Therefore, for a long time, she had been trying to solve the problem of this barrier. However, she did not expect that the barrier that had made her helpless would quietly disperse so easily under Little Hachi's hands. That medicinal fragrance came with the wind. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. The fragrance lingered at the tip of her nose, refreshing her heart and mind. The corners of her lips lifted slightly as she looked toward the main hall. Is this Herb Mountain yours? Chapter 2476. Herb Mountain had always been under the control of the 8th Divine Envoy. Everyone silently agreed that it was Xu Jing's territory. But now, she was being crushed in all aspects on Herb Mountain. This scene shocked countless people, and they were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. How could this be? Herb Mountain is different from before? No. This is Herb Mountain's original appearance. But 10,000 years have passed, and there are not many people left who have seen Herb Mountain in the past. That's why no one brought it up. Thinking about it, the 8th, no, Xu Jing has been in charge of Herb Mountain for so many years, but she hasn't done anything? Anyway, this is the first time I've seen such a vibrant Herb Mountain. That Little Hachi, I'm afraid, all kinds of discussions were going on. In fact, at this time, who wouldn't have guessed that little 8 was the 8th divine emissary? But, if she was the 8th divine envoy, then what was going on with Xu Jing? The 7th divine envoy. Chu Luiyue spoke again. In the main hall, Jin Yunlai's heart suddenly trembled. Almost instantly, he understood that Chu Luiyue wasn't calling him, but, Bam. On the Myriad God Road, right next to little Hachi's name, another golden firework bloomed. Qi Han's name suddenly appeared. Everyone instinctively looked at Qi Han and saw that the same totem had appeared between his eyebrows. He moved his feet. In the distance, the star road outside the door suddenly exploded with thousands of rays of light. Under the dark sky, countless Xian formations condensed into dots of light, flickering and spreading out like a river of stars. At this moment, the entire illusory god palace seemed to be lit up. Jin Yunlai's face was pale. Even he couldn't control all the Xian formations on the star road so easily. However, to Qi Han, this seemed to be a piece of cake. Chu Luiyue lifted her chin slightly and continued asking. Is this star road yours? Her voice was light like the wind, yet it carried an extremely strong pressure. Every single word she spoke was like a thunderclap that exploded in everyone's hearts. Everyone was stunned by what was happening in front of them. If there were still some people who were skeptical about the Herb Mountain before, then now, there was no way to refute it. Qi Han was the 7th divine emissary. However, Chu Luiyue did not stop. She suddenly raised her hand and swept her gaze across it. There was a faint red mark on the back of his hand. Just now, in the main hall, when she was trying to forge a weapon to break through the spirit, her hand was scalded by a tiny wisp of Tianlei power because she was distracted for a moment. Actually, that bit of pain was nothing to her. However, it was very painful. Even though the scars were about to fade, she could still clearly remember the intense pain she had felt at that moment. I just don't know if it's my hand that's hurting or something else. She smiled and raised her hand. Her slender and soft fingers were as tender as spring onions, yet they were also like fine porcelain jade, captivating one's mind. Then, she lightly tapped the air with her finger. Boom! A loud explosion took place all of a sudden. However, this sound actually came from the lightning pool. Oh no! Mu Dongyu suddenly realized something and quickly rushed out. Her body was like a sharp sword, cutting through the air and heading straight for the lightning pool. However, it was already too late. A burly figure had unknowingly arrived above the lightning pool. At this moment, he was raising the hammer in his hand high up and smashing it towards the huge lightning pool. A totem flashed between his eyebrows. As he moved, his muscles almost burst out of his clothes. This hammer carried the force of thousands of kilograms as it landed heavily. The dull sound of the impact seemed to have smashed into everyone's hearts. Then, there was the sound of something shattering. Mu Dongyu was shocked. The ceiling array above the lightning pool was actually smashed open by this hammer. Chi! Below, countless silvery Tianlei broke free from its restraints and began to swim wildly. Mu Dongyu felt a strong sense of uneasiness in her heart. A long spear suddenly appeared in his palm. He didn't even think before he attacked. An extremely sharp sound of air being torn apart was heard. An astonishing force rapidly approached and arrived in the blink of an eye. However, Shijing did not seem to be worried. He did not even turn his head. Seeing that the long spear was about to pierce through his chest, he finally moved. He raised the hammer in his hand and swung it fiercely. Clang! The long spear collided with the hammer just like that. After a crisp sound, the long spear was flung out. Whoosh, thud. The long spear was forcefully swept down by Shijing and pierced into the lightning pool that had yet to be completely unsealed. Crack! A few fine patterns spread out in all directions with the long spear as the center. The array was gradually unsealed. More and more Tianlei surged up one after another. From afar, it looked like a monstrous wave. Mu Dongyu's chest tightened and she was stunned for a moment. He had guarded the lightning pool for 10,000 years and had always felt that he knew every inch of space and every Tianlei power here very well. But only now did he realize that he was ridiculously wrong. "Hehe, the treasure that I hid below back then has not been discovered by you." Shijing laughed. His tiger-like eyes burned with a burning desire to fight. Then, he swung his hammer again. Splash, with one strike, the entire lightning pool also surged. A flash of golden light suddenly appeared. Then, more and more silver and gold Tianlei surged out from below. Those were all Tianlei power buried in the reefs in the deepest part of the lightning pool. "Rise!" Shijing raised his hammer high. Countless Tianlei gathered and soared into the sky. Like a surging river, it cut through the sky and went straight for Chu Luiyue. She took a step forward and looked at the towering illusory god palace. She smiled, but her voice was extremely cold. "Is this lightning pool yours?" Chapter 2477. There was no question more powerful than this. Because the scenes that had occurred before their eyes were all facts. Only then did Shijing turn around and look at the Pantheon record. There was already a bright light shining on it, revealing his name. He was also the real fourth divine envoy. Herb Mountain. Star Road. Lightning Pool. 3 questions were a declaration of sovereignty. No one answered. However, everyone present had already made a choice in their hearts. Even Fan Yunxiao and the others in the main hall could not help but change their expressions as they looked at the blurry figure. How should they deal with the current situation? The golden and silver Tianlei were like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Countless rays of light rushed toward Chu Luiyue in a rush. It was as if they had finally met again after a long time and space, bringing with them endless longing and affection. When they came, they were clearly aggressive, but when they were in front of her, they became careful and gentle. Chu Luiyue looked down and chuckled softly. No wonder the Tianlei were so close to her when she dived into the depths of the lightning pool last time, and even secretly helped her. This was hers in the first place. Even though they had not seen her for too long, they could still recognize her. A few golden Tianlei seemed to be bolder as they touched her hands and arms lightly. Some even circled around her waist and circled back and forth. She smiled. "Don't hit your waist this time." The Tianlei around her waist reluctantly moved away. However, probably because of their reluctance, they still circled around her body. From afar, she seemed to be enveloped in the lightning. The next moment, a black shield appeared in her hand. It was black and heavy, with mysterious patterns engraved on it. Chu Luiyue looked down and scanned the top of it carefully. Then, as if they were summoned, the Tianlei rushed into it crazily. Crackle. An intense and ear-piercing sound of refining was heard. Seeing this, many people were suddenly stunned. What was she planning to do? That black shield seemed to be a divine artifact to begin with, sacred primal chaos jade. Suddenly, an exclamation came from the crowd outside the gate. Isn't that the missing piece of the holy primal chaos jade? In fact, not many people knew about this matter. Thus, many people were shocked when they saw this scene. Aunt Eleven's eyes suddenly lit up. 12th Nyang was also quite anxious. She stood on her tiptoes to take a look. As she read, she couldn't help but touch her forehead. Sister, where's mine? Where's mine? Fourth brother and the others all had bloodline totems, so they should have them too, right? Aunt Eleven suddenly grabbed her hand and ran forward. Sigh, Lu Feng shouted. Just as she was about to give chase, she suddenly felt a formless energy brushing past her. He was stunned for a moment, then raised his hand to grab it. In the void, an inch-long stream of light with an extremely faint green color fell into his palm. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly realized something and turned to look in a certain direction. Big Brother's barrier had already reached here. In this short pause, Ant 11 and Ant 12 had already run to the gate of the palace of the illusory god. Ruan Jianfeng was originally looking at the situation inside in shock. When he heard the movement, he immediately turned back. When he saw the two women rushing over again, he frowned. A hint of impatience and viciousness flashed across his face. If Chu Luiyue was problematic, then her subordinates must be the same too. I must solve this as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Ruan Jianfeng attacked without hesitation. He threw out a stream of divine power. However, before the divine power touched the two, it suddenly stopped. A ball of reddish gold flame flew over and burned it to ashes. More importantly, after it blocked the attack, it didn't leave. Instead, it came straight for Ruan Jianfeng. Ruan Jianfeng was caught off guard. His hand was instantly burned black. He took a few steps back in shock. Why did the fire of the reddish gold celestial phoenix seem to be stronger than before? He was an existence above the level of a god. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be so easily burned by the fire. However, before he could think clearly about this problem, he suddenly heard that noble and indifferent voice sound out once again. Do you think you can offend the 11th and 12th gods' emissaries? As the voice fell, two balls of sparks ignited on the Pantheon record. Then, the names of the two ladies appeared together. Ant 11 and Ant 12 were shrouded by the brilliant light between their eyebrows at the same time. In the next moment, the two had already passed Ruan Jianfeng and went straight for the Holy Chaos Jade. Master. The two of them had a tacit understanding. In an instant, they separated on both sides of the Holy Chaos Jade and looked at the figure in front with bright eyes. Chu Luiyue flicked her wrist. The armillary sky shield instantly flew out and hung above the Holy Chaos Jade. Then, a scroll appeared in her hand. It was the flowing clouds flying illustration. In the next moment, she raised her arm and the flowing clouds flying illustration fell into Ant 11's hand. Merge. Yes. Ant 11 responded. With a swoosh, she unfolded the flowing clouds flying illustration. A strong and bright light quickly gushed out from it. Ant 11's hand brushed across it. A lustrous light flew out from it and merged with the armillary sky shield. Chu Luiyue threw out the great azure sun axe. Merge again. Yes. Ant 12 was nervous and excited. She grabbed the great azure sun axe tightly and twisted it gently with both hands. Another lustrous light flew out. However, it wasn't enough. Looking at the armillary sky shield that didn't fall down and merged with the Holy Chaos Jade, Chu Luiyue suddenly raised her head and looked at the distant horizon. There, the divine gate stood tall and was tightly shut. Fifth. Open the door. Chapter 2478. A voice rang out. Wu Yao, who had arrived in front of the heavenly gate, immediately responded. Yes. With that, he moved and headed straight for the heavenly gate. At this moment, the 11th divine envoy, Qiu Tong, was still guarding this place. The scenes that had occurred earlier had already caused him to be completely dazed. It was only when he saw Wu Yao coming that he finally regained his senses. For some reason, he felt a sense of nervousness in his heart. How dare you? What are you trying to do? Wu Yao clasped his hands together, his knuckles cracking as he chuckled. Didn't you hear what I was trying to do? Qiu Tong's throat went dry, and his body tensed up. The heavenly gate is. Wu Yao was impatient with him talking about this and directly kicked forward. A resplendent light instantly burst out from between his brows. Immediately after, the light completely enveloped him. Without giving Qiu Tong any chance, he punched out. Chi! This punch was extremely heavy. Everywhere it passed, the void collapsed one after another. Large patches of collapsed black holes spread out, and turbulence surged. Get lost. Sensing the powerful force contained in the fist, Xiaofan's heart skipped a beat. In an instant, he felt a strong sense of uneasiness and fear. However, if he dodged at this time, he would not be able to report back to his superiors. Therefore, he could only take it head-on. Xiaofan quickly gathered all the divine power in his body and poured it into his right fist. At this moment, Wuxia's fierce fist wind had already arrived in front of his face. That astonishing power seemed to want to tear his entire body apart in an instant. Xiaofan was shocked. A quarter of an hour ago, Wuxia was just an ordinary god. How did he become so strong in the blink of an eye? Without thinking too much, he also punched out. Bang! With a muffled sound, the two fists collided. In an instant, Xiaofan felt as if he had punched an extremely hard iron wall. His entire palm instantly went numb. The powerful impact spread out with the two of them as the center. Xiaofang's blood surged, and his face quickly turned red. A thick, sweet, and fishy taste surged up his throat, but he swallowed it down. However, his hand and half of his arm could no longer feel anything. This punch was simply too powerful. As if seeing through his thoughts, Wuxia raised his eyebrows, licked his lips, and chuckled. I've been training for so many years. Do you think it's all for nothing? Seeing his expression, Xiaofan suddenly had a bad feeling. After all, he had been in the position of the 11th oracle for many years, so he was still vigilant in the face of death. Therefore, in the next moment, he retreated without hesitation. However, Wuxia was even faster. He opened his palm and grabbed Xiaofang's wrist. Heh, you want to run before the fight is over? How could there be such a good thing? Xiaofan was shocked and immediately raised her leg to counterattack. Wuxia seemed to have expected this and kicked horizontally. Bang! Crack! The crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. Xiaofang's leg was at an extremely strange angle. Intense pain engulfed him. His face turned from red to white. At the same time, he finally couldn't hold it in any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. But before he could spit out blood, Wuxia had already used his hidden strength to twist his hand around. This time, Xiaofang's shoulder was also dislocated. TSK. You can't even withstand a single blow. Wuxia looked at him with disdain. Well, at least the blood didn't splash on him. Then, he simply dislocated Xiaofang's other shoulder. Of course, he easily broke the arm together. I told you to get lost. Wuxia snorted and threw him out. He clapped his hands and continued walking forward. He came to the front of the divine gate and raised his head slightly. No wonder he felt that there was something wrong with the gate. After that, he looked at it for so many days. Of course, he was most familiar with his own gate. He loosened his shoulders, raised his hand, and placed it on the divine gate. Then, he pushed hard. Creak, the gate of heaven, which only opened once every 10,000 years, opened once again under his palm. Chu Luyue held his breath and focused. Then, a clear shout spread far and wide. Return! This shout went with the wind, passed through the illusory god palace, passed through the star path, and rushed out of the divine gate. Then, it echoed throughout the entire divine ruins world. A gust of wind blew over the undulating mountains. The leaves rustled, and the pine trees rustled. Suddenly, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The steepest mountain seemed to have been split apart by an invisible force. Chi! A silver stream of light suddenly rushed out from the bottom of the mountain. It went straight to the gate that opened again in the sky. In a certain ancestral hall. It was silent. There were people in twos and threes leaving the ancestral hall. It seemed that they had just finished a worship. However, at this moment, a voice came from the dome. Everyone was taken aback as they raised their heads to look. That's, swoosh. A piercing sound suddenly came from the ancestral hall behind everyone. Everyone turned around and saw a stream of light rushing into the sky. The treasure that had been stored away for so many years finally answered the call and returned to the place where it was first found. This voice also reached the Peach Blossom Cove at the same time. Sanson was lying on a small bed reading the account book. When he heard the voice, he was shocked and quickly got up to look outside. Then, almost without any hesitation, he rushed out of the gate. He didn't even have time to pick up the account book that fell on the ground. The servant who was guarding outside the door saw this and couldn't help but be shocked. "What are you?" Before he could finish his sentence, Sanson's figure was already far away. The servant looked into the room and hurriedly shouted, "You didn't bring your account book." Sanson didn't even turn his head. Don't. The servant was stunned and almost doubted that he had heard it wrong. Don't want it? This was something that he, who had always regarded money as his life, and the account book was more important than anything else, could say? Seeing that Sanson was running further and further away, the servant chased after him. "Where are you going?" Why did it seem that he was going to leave the Peach Blossom Cove directly? "The Peach Blossom Cove still needs your protection." Sanson's footsteps were hurried. Hearing this, it muttered to itself. "This world belongs to my master. What is a small Peach Blossom Cove?" This was the real world, and all the land belonged to the king. The servant didn't hear him clearly because Sanson had already run far away. Soon, 13 caught up. "Third brother, 13, you're here too? Quick! Let's go together." Sanson hurriedly waved at him. 13 pursed his lips and nodded firmly. Then, the two ran in a certain direction together. Soon, they arrived at the gate of the Peach Blossom Cove. Yujio was waiting here. Seeing the two of them, he was delighted. That was Master's voice. Sanson rubbed his face and stepped into the gate. Back to the Illusion God Palace. Chapter 2479. Whoosh! A ray of light quickly arrived at the divine gate and arrived above the holy chaos jade without hesitation. Aunt 11 raised her head and glanced at it. With a wave of her hand, the item fell into her hand. It was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. She put away the sacred artifact and summoned a ray of light that flew into the celestial shield. Aunt 12 didn't stay idle either. She fused all the sacred artifacts in Chuliuyue's hands into the shield. The onlookers were shocked when they saw this scene. So, she was summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts just now? Someone murmured in the deathly silent crowd. This was too domineering. Was she going to completely fuse the power of the celestial shield and put it back into the holy chaos jade? She didn't even hesitate to open the divine gate again. While everyone was still in shock, several more streams of light flew in from outside the heaven gate. At this time, the celestial shield was already covered by rays of light. Chu Luyue took out the heavenly square cauldron. She looked down and stared at it for a while. Then, she patted it gently with her palm. This was her first sacred artifact. At that time, Zichen was still sealed in it. She suddenly thought of something and looked back at the main hall of the illusory god palace. Rong Xiu's figure was clearly visible. The two of them looked at each other. This moment was more than thousands of words. The corner of her lips curled up slightly. Then, she looked at Zichen. Zichen's mind was connected with hers. Almost at the moment when she looked over, he looked up. Then, he pursed his thin lips and nodded gently. Chu Liyue's smile deepened. In order to send the heavenly square cauldron to her, that person really put in a lot of effort. Back then, she had asked Zichen who sealed him in the heavenly square cauldron. But he had never given her an answer. Because he couldn't remember the other party's appearance clearly. But now, she finally understood. If that person was the strongest person in the world, then sealing a three-eyed eagle, or even messing up its memories, would be a simple matter. Hidden behind the memories, which were either true or false, was his meticulous planning. Had he been preparing for this for 1,000 years, or even longer? Chu Luiyue gently exhaled. It turned out that he had been plotting against her for more than just this lifetime. At this moment, Rong Xiu suddenly raised his hand. Wan Feng's halberd suddenly flew out. Tut! Following this sound, a ray of light flew out and merged with the celestial globe shield. At the same time, Chu Luiyue pushed his palm forward. Wang! The heavenly square cauldron hummed. Sparkling light overflowed. At this point, all of the saint artifacts had returned. The armillary heaven's shield had been completely enveloped by the lustrous light. The patterns on it were mysterious and complicated. If one looked at it for too long, they would feel dizzy. All of you, step back. Chu Luiyue said indifferently. When Ant 11 and Ant 12 heard this, they immediately retreated a good distance away. At this moment, the red gold flames were still burning around the primal chaos holy jade. The armillary heaven's shield was suspended in mid-air. It was only an inch away from the groove below. Under the burning of the flames, it seemed to have become boiling hot. Occasionally, there would be sparks splashing down. It was like a bright firework suddenly blooming in the dark night. The two intense and extreme colors complemented each other. It was almost dazzling. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. She was standing on the primal chaos holy jade. At this moment, she moved directly to the centermost position. The armillary heaven's shield was right beside her feet. Then, she stomped her foot down. Boom! The armillary heaven's shield suddenly fell. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, she thought that the other party wanted to snatch her armillary heaven's shield, so she refused to let it go no matter what. But now, she personally returned the armillary heaven's shield to the primal chaos holy jade to take back the primal chaos holy jade that originally belonged to her. In an instant, endless pressure erupted from under her feet. In the main hall, everyone was also watching this scene. The Divine Master's voice suddenly sounded. Emperor, did you help her just now? Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. The 10,000 Peaks halberd was originally refined with the power of the primal chaos holy jade. Now that the armillary heaven's shield has returned, this thing should be returned as well. The Divine Master suddenly laughed. That being said, the primal chaos holy jade was originally intact. But back then, this primal chaos holy jade was originally in perfect condition. If the Emperor hadn't sent Tang Ke to act, the armillary heaven shield wouldn't have been separated. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Even Su Li couldn't hide her shock as she looked at Tang Ke. Tang Ke rubbed his nose. In fact, the Emperor personally obtained the armillary heaven's shield by splitting the primal chaos holy jade. It had nothing to do with him. He just went down to receive it. The Peach Blossom Dock was the location that the Emperor had chosen long ago. Tang Ke had long known that the armillary heaven's shield would land there. So when Su Li challenged him to a battle, he chose the Peach Blossom Dock. In the end, the armillary heaven's shield's power was too shocking. In the end, he and Su Li both died. Fortunately, he managed to save his soul and his life. Hearing this, Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips suddenly curled into an extremely cold smile. If the armillary heaven's shield hadn't been broken back then and reduced the power of the primal chaos holy jade, would the divine fire have burned until today? Hearing this, the Divine Master finally stopped talking. In fact, they all knew very well whether this matter was due to selfishness or other reasons. However, everyone was just taking what they wanted, so they all remained silent. It was meaningless to talk about this now. Rong Xiu looked forward, and a dim light vaguely flashed across his eyes. At this moment, the armillary heaven's shield had completely merged with the primal chaos holy jade. That figure was standing on top of it. She was slender and exquisite, and her skirt fluttered in the wind. Her shoulders, which were originally slightly thin, were tenacious and straight. Then, she moved her feet slightly and turned around. The surrounding flames were raging, and the scarlet golden flames were leaping like demons. Chu Luyue looked forward and narrowed her eyes. Then, the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Chi! A dazzling golden and black longsword suddenly appeared in her palm. The longsword was raised high, and it shone brightly. Then, the sword fell, and the wind blew. Poof! A cluster of divine fire burned on the white jade pillar. Different from before, this flame was rich and bright with a scarlet golden color. In the next moment, the terrifying sword energy carried the power of thousands of thunderbolts and raging flames and swept over. Boom! That clear and dignified voice echoed in the entire illusory god palace. It's time to pay back what you owe me. Chapter 2480. The sword descended like a thunderbolt. Raging flames and gales surged along with the sword aura, heading straight for the main hall of the illusory god palace. A neat sword mark instantly appeared on the ground. In an instant, rocks flew everywhere, and smoke and dust rose. Mu Qinghe's expression changed slightly. She flew up and stabbed her sword into the ground. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely, and violent shockwaves surged in all directions. Mu Qinghe's body shook, and she knelt on the ground with one leg. She barely supported her body with the help of the sword and spat out a mouthful of blood. The dark red blood splattered on the back of her hand and the hilt of the sword, and a rich sweet and fishy smell spread out. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. As the strongest among the gods' envoys, the first god's envoy, Mu Qinghe, was actually unable to completely withstand Chu Luyue's attack. Her current strength was clearly above that of her eminence. Yu Qian was standing not far from Mu Qinghe. Seeing this, his heart jumped a few times, and his entire body tensed up. If this sword landed on him, he would probably be in a worse state than Mu Qinghe. He suddenly thought of something and raised his head to look at the Pantheon record. Then, he was stunned. Her name wasn't on it. The Pantheon record shone brightly. Other than Xiao Ran and the rest, the names of Qi Han and the rest had all appeared. But, her name wasn't on it. How was this possible? Yu Qian stared at the Pantheon record in disbelief for a long time. There really wasn't any trace of Chu Luyue on it. At this moment, a low and hoarse voice sounded from the main hall. Shengguanyu has rebelled against his superiors and has evil intentions. Everyone in the illusory god palace has the right to kill him. Listen to my orders, god's envoys. Cut off his wings and kill him. This order was obviously passed down to Mu Qinghe and the rest. Yes. Everyone received the order and rushed out of the main hall in the next moment. Several battlefields instantly appeared in the heavens above. Although the previous scene made them suspicious and uneasy, they had no choice but to obey the orders of the God Master. After Yu Qian received the order, he rushed towards God Beast Mountain without hesitation. This was the illusory God Palace, their territory. Even if Chu Luyue and the others had some strength, it was impossible for them to win in this place. Not to mention other things, just those divine beasts alone were enough to make it difficult for them to deal with. As Yu Qian was thinking, he suddenly paused. He looked at the God-Beast Mountain not far in front of him and frowned. At the top of the mountain, a tall man stood with his hands behind his back. Hua Shuangshuang. Yu Qian had interacted with Hua Shuangshuang before, so he didn't like her. Unexpectedly, he had been waiting here for a long time. Seeing him, Hua Shuangshuang laughed loudly. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Yu Qian smirked coldly. What? Are you waiting to snatch mythological Beast Mountain? Hua Shuangshuang raised her eyebrows. This was originally my master's. Now, I'm merely taking it back. How is this snatching? Yu Qian's heart beat wildly. In fact, they had already guessed Chu Liuyue's identity. Now, Hua Shuangshuang's words confirmed their guess. This battle was unavoidable. Yu Qian shouted in a deep voice. All divine beasts, listen to my order. Kill Hua Shuangshuang immediately. At his order, all the divine beasts on God Beast Mountain quickly gathered at the top of the mountain. At this time, the sky was gloomy, and the forest was lush with trees. One could only vaguely see shadows. Ferocious auras quickly approached. However, Hua Shuangshuang didn't seem to be nervous. She stood in place calmly. That small wind-stepping tiger was lying on her back. It stared at Yu Qian nervously and fiercely. It let out a threatening whimper from its throat. On one of Hua Shuangshuang's arms was the golden-winged crow-bone beast. Perhaps because of the huge commotion, the entire God-Beast Mountain began to tremble violently. Whoosh! A golden cloud leopard was the first to appear at the top of the mountain. Yu Qian looked down at Hua Shuangshuang with a cold smile. He was waiting for those divine beasts to tear Hua Shuangshuang to shreds. However, the next moment, the scene in front of him stunned him. That golden cloud leopard didn't bite Hua Shuangshuang. Instead, it came to his feet and obediently bowed its head. Yu Qian's pupils shrank. A strong sense of uneasiness welled up in his heart. Following that, more and more divine beasts appeared. Their behavior was exactly the same as that of the golden cloud leopard. Yu Qian was about to speak when he saw Hua Shuangshuang raise her chin. Today, those who have grievances will take revenge. As soon as he finished speaking, all the divine beasts let out a roar and charged towards Yu Qian with extreme speed. The golden-winged crow-bone beast also flapped its wings and flew toward Yu Qian. Yu Qian was both shocked and furious. How dare you? This sentence was usually quite effective, but at this moment, it didn't seem to exist in the ears of the divine beasts. There were more than 100 divine beasts here, and they all pounced on Yu Qian. In the blink of an eye, they had completely surrounded him. Whoa! Hua Shuangshuang patted the head of the little wind-strider tiger on her shoulder and smiled. Alright, you don't have to join in the fun. It's the same for you to watch them take revenge for you. Only then did the little wind-strider tiger obediently lay back down. However, its eyes were still fixed on that side, afraid to miss any excitement. As the second envoy, Yu Qian's strength was unquestionable. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to watch over Divine Beast Mountain. It was a pity that he didn't care about these divine beasts in the past. Beating, scolding, and killing them all depended on his mood. The divine beasts had accumulated resentment toward him for a long time. Today, they could finally take revenge. Naturally, they wouldn't hold back. If there were only one or two of them, they wouldn't be Yu Qian's match. But now, there were more than 100 divine beasts attacking him without regard for their lives. How could he deal with them? Yu Qian's figure was surrounded and covered, so it was hard to see him. However, the smell of blood was getting thicker and thicker. Hua Shuangshuang looked up at the Pantheon record. His name was on the list. You're just a dove occupying a magpie's nest. Do you really think it's yours after robbing someone else? He sneered softly. Fierce battles were taking place all over the illusory god palace. At this moment, Sanson finally brought them to the heavenly gate. He saw Wu Yao guarding the heavenly gate and hurriedly ran over. Hey! Fifth brother. We're not late, right? Wu Yao laughed out loud and walked over. He picked Chiu Tong up and tossed her aside. You're not late. Third brother, accept this greeting gift. Sanson didn't even think about it and immediately dodged. Bang! Chiu Tong fell heavily to the ground. He was already heavily injured. Now that he was being tossed around like this, there wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't injured. He even felt that his broken bones had pierced into his flesh. The pain was so painful that he almost fainted. Sanson glanced at him with disdain. "You've already dealt with it. Why are you giving it to me? Are you looking down on your third brother?" Xiaofan glanced at him and said faintly. "Third brother, you just don't want to fight and dirty your hands, right?" Chapter 2481. Sanson coughed. "Xiaofan, if you have the time, you should go to Herb Mountain and see if you can help little Hachi." Xiaofan sighed. "Herb Mountain stretches for hundreds of miles, but Sister 8 only gave me one mountain to grow vegetables. What else can I help her with?" Sanson glared at him. "That's your Sister 8. Hurry up and go." Xiaofan understood tacitly and immediately slipped away. Wuxia looked around. "Where's Big Brother? This sword can't be used anymore. I have to find him to change it." Wuxiao pointed in a certain direction. "He should be over there, right?" Wuxia left in a hurry. Sanson patted little 13th's shoulder. "Let's go. Go with third brother to collect the debt." After saying that, he pulled Wuxia away, not forgetting to remind him. "Fifth brother, you can deal with that person yourself." Hearing this, Chiu Tong, who was originally dizzy and almost fainted, was immediately jolted awake. He looked up and met Wu Yao's gaze. Wu Yao moved his wrist. "What did your master say just now?" "He wants to kill us?" he asked slowly. A hint of fear flashed across Chiu Tong's eyes. Wu Yao's combat strength was far above his. He really had no strength to refute now. "In that case, then, I won't be polite." Wu Yao chuckled. "Since master wants you to return it, then spit it all out, without leaving anything behind." As he spoke, he grabbed Chiu Tong by the collar and punched him in the forehead. Bang! In an instant, flesh and blood splattered. Chiu Tong's physical body was destroyed by Wu Yao's punch just like that. A black mist quickly condensed. It was Chiu Tong's soul. Wu Yao didn't even blink. He stepped forward and crushed it with his bare hands. In an instant, a strong wind blew. On the Pantheon record, Chiu Tong's name quickly dimmed and finally disappeared silently. Many people saw this scene. The 11th divine envoy has fallen. It seems to be that Wu Yao who did it. It's him. Weren't the 11 oracles responsible for guarding the gate of heaven? Wu Yao went over and forced the door open. He must be the one who killed him. "You're still calling me the 11th oracle? Wasn't it obvious who the oracle was?" Someone refuted. Everyone fell silent for a moment. That's right. If Chiu Tong and the others were really divine envoys, then why would they be defeated by Wu Yao and the others? Xu Jing, Mu Dongyu, Jin Yunlai, not a single one of these people did not successively lose in this battle. Or perhaps these things didn't belong to them in the first place. And the oracle was not the most important thing. Most importantly, the one in the palace of the illusory god. Herb Mountain. Little Hachi looked up and blinked her beautiful eyes. Her red lips curled up. "Seriously? I actually let fifth brother beat me to it." She was the first to be called master. In the end, she was so focused on watching the show that she forgot to take care of him first. Thinking of this, she turned to look at Xu Jing. At this time, Xu Jing was on the verge of death. He almost didn't even have the strength to speak. Sensing little Hachi's gaze, his body stiffened, and a deep sense of fear surged in his eyes. "I wanted to let you watch for a while longer, but it seems that there's no need for that now." Little Hachi shrugged. "Since master has already started to make a move, then I'll pay him back little by little." Then, little Hachi waved her hand, and a ball of flame instantly flew out of her palm. In the next moment, Xu Jing's body was instantly wrapped in blazing flames. A few vague groans of pain were heard, and then gradually quieted down. At the same time, Xu Jing's name disappeared from the pantheon record. Chu Luiyue looked forward. Mu Qinghe was half kneeling in front of the main hall. Her long sword was stabbed into the ground. Her face was pale, and the corners of her lips were stained with dark red blood. He looked like he was in a sorry state. She just stared at him, her eyes calm. After a moment, she said in a calm voice, "Mu Qinghe, the last time you knelt before me was in Tianling." Mu Qinghe's hand that was holding the sword suddenly tightened, and the blood in his chest surged. Then, he said with difficulty, "I'll fight for the Divine Master until my death." Chu Luiyue smiled softly. Of course, he wasn't calling her Divine Lord, but his true master. "You're right." She seemed to agree with him and nodded. "I misunderstood you earlier. The person you followed was never me. How can you talk about betrayal?" Mu Qinghe didn't say anything. Many people were stunned when they heard these words. Mu Qinghe seemed to be related to her. Shengguan Jing and the others who knew the inside story had complicated expressions. At this point, there was nothing they didn't understand. From the beginning, Mu Qinghe was a member of the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes as if she was recalling something. Then, the corners of her lips curled up. "Actually, it wasn't a coincidence that you appeared on the streets of the Tianling imperial capital that day, right?" Mu Qinghe looked down and stared at the ground in front of him. A ball of blood was gradually staining the ground. A bone-chilling coldness came from all directions and enveloped him. "However, since you came for the zither score, why did you go through so much trouble? You even had to pretend that you didn't know how to read and follow me to learn bit by bit." "That wasn't all," Chu Luiyue thought quietly. At the beginning, he didn't even know how to hold a brush. His clumsiness and nervousness were clearly visible. She patiently taught him several times. When she saw him finally writing the word "you" crookedly, she was even happy for a long time. Now that she thought about it, it was just a show that he had painstakingly acted out. "Actually, you didn't have to pretend to be so clumsy back then." Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. "Don't you find it annoying to have to be taught several times for something that you already know?" Mu Qinghe closed her eyes. Her knuckles were white from exerting too much force. After a long time, she opened her eyes and said word by word, "It's already in the past. There's no need to mention it now." Chu Luiyue tilted his head. Divine power surged on the Star Darkness sword. "Yes, it's already in the past. There's no need to mention it again. However, I really wasted a lot of time and energy on you back then. Now that I think about it, I can't help but feel that it's a pity. I'll get back what your master owes me later. Now, you'll have to pay back what you owe me first." With that, she raised her sword again. At this moment, the second flame on the white jade pillar had already ignited wildly. The power of her sword was clearly stronger than before. The firelight reflected in her eyes was dazzling and resplendent. Chi! The sword fell. The sword aura surged forward. Mu Qinghe raised his sword to block. Crack! The sword in his hand shattered in an instant. Then, his body fell back uncontrollably. Immediately after, the sword aura suddenly changed direction and pierced through his right leg. A bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared in an instant. White bones could be seen inside. "This sword is what you owe, Dumpling." Chapter 2482. Bang! Mu Qinghe's knee landed heavily on the ground. Chu Luiyue didn't hesitate and sent out a second sword. Another sword chi arrived in an instant. This time, it was his right leg that was cut off. He knelt there, barely supporting his body with his hands. Blood kept flowing out from his body, and soon, it was dark red. First messenger. Seeing this, Sangbai was shocked. In their impression, Mu Qinghe had always been extremely powerful. Even the second messenger, Yu Qian, who had been in charge of the illusory god palace for many years, didn't dare to overstep the rules in front of him. When Mu Qinghe asked him to kneel for 3 days and 3 nights, he did as he was told and didn't dare to say a word of no. Who would have thought that Chu Luiyue would directly suppress him when she made a move? He didn't even have the strength to retaliate. Sangbai was anxious. Without any hesitation, she rushed over. However, at this moment, a voice came from not far away. 13. Stop him. Swoosh. Before Sangbai could react, he realized that there was someone in front of him. He hurriedly looked over and saw that the person in front of him was a teenager who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old. He had a delicate appearance and a tall figure. However, the aura around him was so strong that it couldn't be ignored. Sangbai suddenly realized something and looked up at the Pantheon record. On it, a name gradually appeared, 13. This teenager was, Master wants to settle the score with Mu Qinghe now. How can anyone else interfere? Sanson wobbled over, glanced at Sangbai from head to toe, and snorted. You don't have the qualifications to make my master take action. 13, he stole your position. Just get rid of him. 13 nodded and attacked without hesitation. At this moment, the power of the bloodline in their bodies had been awakened, so it wasn't a problem for them to deal with Sangbai. Since it concerned his master, 13's actions were especially swift and decisive. Sangbai had no choice but to fight back. However, how could he be 13's opponent? 13's fists were fast, and his movements were fast. He didn't give Sangbai any chance to counterattack. In a short while, he was already at a disadvantage. At this moment, a shriek suddenly came from the divine beast mountain. Roar! With that, the other divine beasts also raised their heads and roared. Accompanied by these cries, the Yu Qian name on the Pantheon record instantly vanished. The second oracle, Yu Qian, had fallen. Sanson raised his head to take a look and clicked his tongue. Then, he said to 13 beside him, Little 13, you deal with it yourself. Third brother, I'm going over first. Second brother has already finished, but I haven't moved yet. 13 responded and continued to fight with Sangbai. Sang's 3 walked forward for a while and saw a person walking out of the main hall. He narrowed his eyes and took a look. As if sensing his gaze, that person also looked over. The two of them looked at each other. It's you, right? Sanson asked. Fan Yunxiao frowned. At this moment, Yen Gu suddenly walked out from the main hall. When he saw Sanson, he immediately said, That's right. It's him. Sanson snorted. That's why I said it. It smells like copper. Yen Ge's mouth twitched. What right do you have to talk about others like that? However, seeing that Sanson was about to make a move, he tactfully swallowed his words. He cleared his throat. Remember to come to my place after the fight and take that account book away. If the Emperor hadn't asked him to take care of this matter, he wouldn't be willing to look at such a thick account book every day. He was tired of looking at it. Sanson's eyes immediately lit up as he rubbed his hands eagerly. Come, come. Let me see how capable a person who has been in the position of the third oracle for so long is. Yujio followed the direction Wu Yao pointed and arrived at the courtyard. Big brother? He followed his senses and pushed open the door of one of the rooms. Sun Yi was indeed inside. Yujio was delighted. Big brother, this is. As he spoke, he glanced around and saw a sand table in front of Sun Yi. He widened his eyes slightly as shock flashed across his face. This is, the sand table of the illusion god palace? This sand table was accurately replicated according to a certain ratio. The mountains, rivers, houses, and plants were all identical to the illusion god palace. At this moment, streaks of green light gracefully covered the entire sand table. Sunny looked up. "What's the matter?" "Wuxia. Big brother, at this time, you still want me to use this small wooden sword? Isn't it inappropriate?" As he spoke, he waved the wooden sword in his hand. Sunny nodded. "That's true. It's time to change to something more convenient." Wuxia was delighted, but before he could speak, Sunny continued. "It's just that your sword isn't with me." Wuxia was stunned. "Then, where is it?" Sunny's expression was calm. "The illusion god see." Wuxia's face stiffened. "Big brother, you are joking, right? Right? The illusion god see is so big. How troublesome would it be to find a sword?" Sunny had already looked at the sand table again. "Before I seal the illusion god see, you'd better hurry." The corner of Wuxia's mouth twitched. Big brother was clearly in charge of the illusion god see, so he definitely knew where his sword was. Why did he have to make him make this trip? Sunny didn't look up. "I don't have time." Wuxia. "Oh." Seeing that Sunny had continued, Wuxia gritted his teeth and no longer hesitated. He turned around and headed towards the illusion god see. At this moment, someone rushed out of the illusion god see and arrived in front of the heavenly gate. It was Biling. Chapter 2483. She had been waiting in the depths of the illusionary god ocean and came out when she sensed that something was wrong. When he saw it, he was dumbfounded. The heavenly gate was open again. And, the person guarding the gate was no longer Chiu Tong, but another man. Biling's eyes quickly scanned Wu Yao, and she was even more shocked. This person was extremely strong. "Who are you? How dare you be so presumptuous in front of the heavenly gate?" She shouted angrily with a cold face. Wu Yao crossed his arms and leaned against the heavenly gate. He had already sensed it when Biling came up, so he wasn't surprised. Hearing that, he just raised his eyes lazily and smiled. "Heh, I was wondering why there was one person missing. But it's not bad to send yourself to me." Biling was even angrier. At this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from the illusionary god palace. Boom! She looked up subconsciously, and her pupils shrank. When did the divine fire of the illusionary god palace go out? Under the dark sky, several bolts of silver heavenly lightning shot up from the lightning pool and crazily bombarded a certain direction. The loud sound just now came from there. She was shocked and didn't know what to say. The scene in front of her was far beyond her imagination. She had only been away for a while. How could? Wu Yao also looked over, touched his chin, and explained kindly, "Hey, your fourth divine emissary seems to be on the verge of dying." At this moment, a black hammer suddenly smashed down on the ball of light. Wu Yao clicked his tongue. Fourth brother still has a bad temper. Then, Biling saw with her own eyes that Mu Dongyu's name on the brilliant Pantheon record quickly dimmed and disappeared. This hammer had indeed directly taken his life. She was horrified, and a chill instantly spread to her limbs and bones. Then, almost without hesitation, she turned around and tried to escape. The illusionary god palace was extremely dangerous now. Wu Yao snorted and immediately waved out a barrier to intercept it. "You're dreaming if you want to leave at this time." At this moment, Wuxia hurried over. Wu Yao asked, "Ninth brother, where are you going?" Wuxia explained helplessly. "Big brother asked me to go to the illusionary god sea to get the sword." As he spoke, he glanced over. "Oh, fifth brother, are you going to kill both of us?" Wu Yao wanted to leave her for the others, but when he heard this, he was immediately amused. That makes sense. There were a total of 13 people. Apart from Mu Qinghe and Mo Shiqian who was already dead, there was less than one of them each. Such a great opportunity indeed could not be missed. Bailing was shocked. Kill both of them? Could it be? Before she could think clearly, Wu Yao had already she immediately. Pa! An extremely loud sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. However, in the next moment, the whip was suddenly sliced apart by a piercingly cold strand of sword qi. It was Yu Jiu who had thrown the broken wooden sword over. Ninth brother, I'll take half of this head when we return. With that, he disappeared outside the divine gate. Wu Yao couldn't help but laugh. Stinking brat, you sure are calculating. Loses. Almost at the same time, two names fell on the Pantheon record. Sang Bai. Bailing. For well weighed the hammer in his hand. Oh, 13th brother, you've become much stronger. You're even faster than third brother. But Wu Yao is really cunning. He took down two of them just because he was guarding the heavenly gate. He stretched his shoulders. If he didn't have to guard the thunder pool, he might be the one to kill both of them. At this moment, Jin Yunlai's situation wasn't any better. His path had already been blocked by 7 coldness. The two of them were in a stalemate. Chi-Han stared at him, his voice cold. I wanted to go to the star path and give you a quick death, but now it seems that there's no need. It doesn't matter how you die. It's not good to dirty the star path. These words were the greatest humiliation to Jin Yunlai. He gritted his teeth. Do you think you can decide my life and death at will just because you control the star path? Don't forget, I was in charge of the star path for 10,000 years. How did you finish the star path? Do you need me to tell you? Chi-Han interrupted him bluntly. If it weren't for your master's help, you would still be trapped outside the illusory god palace. Jin Yunlai's face turned pale. That was right. This was the deepest secret in his heart. After the war, the 13 divine envoys died. The divine master wanted to choose a new divine envoy, but no one passed the star path. In the end, the divine master chose him. With his help, he was able to finish the star path and become the 7th divine envoy. Everyone thought that he had relied on his own strength to reach where he was today. But in reality, he knew very well that this was not the case. He just didn't expect Chi-Han to see through him. You're not the only one who used the same method to occupy the position of divine envoy. Chi-Han's expression was cold. Although it was a question, his tone was very certain. Jin Yunlai's body trembled slightly. Swoosh! Chi-Han attacked, and multiple Xian formations flew out at the same time, completely surrounding Jin Yunlai in the middle and killing him in a frenzy. If you don't have the ability, don't stay in that position. As Chi-Han finished speaking, Jin Yunlai's name disappeared from the Pantheon record. Not long after, Ruan Jianfeng was defeated by Lu Feng. Almost at the same time, 13 killed Shi Yan. He became the second person after Wu Yao to complete a double kill. Chi-Han followed closely behind and killed Jiu Long as well. Now, Sanson was the last one. When he finally stepped on Fan Yinxiao's head, he looked up and was instantly disheartened. Why are they all so fast? They didn't give him any face at all. 13 came to his side. Third brother, big brother told you to cultivate more. Sanson touched his nose. Cough, this isn't what your third brother is good at. Everyone has their own strengths, right? As he spoke, he looked at Yen Gu. Where's the stuff? Yen Gu flicked his wrist, and an account book flew to Sanson. Sanson caught the item with one hand. He couldn't help but touch the cover. It's really the same as before, 13 suddenly whispered. Third brother, do you think Master will kill Mu Qinghe? Actually, this was the question in many people's minds. Countless pairs of eyes looked over. At this moment, Mu Qinghe's legs were crippled. She knelt on the ground with blood all over her body. Chu Luyue stood quietly with a sword in one hand. Suddenly, she turned her gaze and looked to the side. Hong Yao was lying on Dumpling's chest. It seemed to have cried until there were no more tears left. Sensing Chu Liuyue's gaze, it raised its head and looked over with a sorrowful gaze. Swish! Chu Liyue slashed with her sword. The sharp sword Qi nailed Mu Qinghe's right hand to the ground. "This sword is to pay you back for what you did back then," she said coldly. "You don't have the right to write my name." Mu Qinghe knelt on the ground with her head lowered. Her fingers were slightly curled. "Just watch," Chu Liyue murmured softly. The next moment, she lifted her foot and headed toward the main hall of the illusory god palace. Digression, it's so stuck. 630 is even worse. Chapter 2484. At this point, only Mu Qinghe was still alive among the 13 god envoys of the illusion god palace. However, he was already covered in wounds, and he was on the verge of death. He was only a hair's breadth away from death. Chu Liyue held her sword and walked toward the main hall step by step. The ground around her was stained with blood, and it was a complete mess. As she slowly walked forward, clusters of flames began to burn on the white jade pillar behind her. That was the true power of a god master. As the flames leaped, Chu Liyue's aura surged crazily again. Sensing the terrifying pressure that was gradually emitted from her body, the crowd outside the door gradually felt their chests tighten, and they found it difficult to breathe. They all retreated. Looking at the slender figure slowly walking out of the flames, countless people were filled with horror. Wasn't she already strong enough? Even Mu Qinghe couldn't take more than 3 moves from her. Why was she still getting stronger? Where was her limit? Zichen was originally looking at Chu Liyue. Suddenly, he felt that the little person in his arms was a little strange, so he looked down. What he saw caused him to be stunned. Dumpling's body seemed to be, gradually warming up. Even the greenish-black death qi between her eyebrows seemed to have dissipated a lot compared to before. He subconsciously reached out and touched her little face. It was indeed warm. Zichen's heart suddenly beat faster. He suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed. Could it be? He suddenly raised his head. On the chaos holy jade, the reddish-gold flame was still burning fiercely. It even seemed to be hotter than before. At this time, 5 flames had lit up on the white jade pillar. The wounds on Dumpling's body began to heal rapidly. Hong Yao also noticed something. It stared at Dumpling's little face, not daring to move. Then, the 6th, 7th, and 8th flames appeared. Chu Liyue walked past Mu Qinghe. She was surrounded by a strong murderous and bloody aura. Mu Qinghe's body moved a little, as if she wanted to get up. She raised her head to take a look. But in the end, he stopped all his actions. More and more blood spread out beneath his body. When the 9th flame burned, Dumpling's face finally flushed red. The bones and flesh on her 2 small feet regrew and reconnected. Chu Liyue came to the front of the steps. Then, she lifted her leg and stepped onto the steps. Qi. The 10th flame was ignited. The moment her feet stepped on the stairs, the 3 water droplets in her dantian started to fluctuate again. This time, it was more intense than any of the previous times. Chu Liyue continued to climb upwards. When the 11th flame was ignited, a water droplet suddenly collided with another water droplet and fused together. She ascended the 9 steps. When he stepped onto the last level, the 12th flame appeared. The 3rd water droplet also merged. The round and beautiful water droplet quietly floated in her dantian. The vast and shocking power continued to surge. Chu Liyue stood firmly and finally arrived in front of the main hall of the illusory god palace. At this time, Dumpling's injuries had mostly healed. Between her eyebrows, a bright light flickered. Zichen's throat was a little dry. He slowly clenched his fists, but his gaze was fixed on her. Chu Luyue held her breath and concentrated. Then, she sighed softly. This light sigh was carried away by the wind. In an instant, it overturned the entire illusory god palace. Chi! The 13th flame was finally ignited. Between heaven and earth, the flames burned fiercely. At the same time, Dumpling's body suddenly surged with endless flames, completely enveloping her. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes. In an instant, a pressure that seemed to come from the distant time and space covered the sky and earth. Countless divine beasts knelt on the ground, hissing in unison, declaring their absolute submission and reverence. She was reborn from the flames and opened her 9th meridian. Mao Jin murmured in shock. Then, he finally realized something. Could it be, between them, it's not a master-servant contract, but a life contract? In the next moment, Dumpling suddenly flew out from Zi Chen's arms. Wrapped in flames, she transformed into her true form. Like a pair of wings hanging from the clouds, it swept over with blazing wind and waves. Screech! A phoenix cry instantly resounded in the sky above the illusory god palace. Sacred and honorable. That was, the absolute pressure of the divine beast of the illusory god palace. On Fengming Mountain, the 2 Tian baby also grew its 9th leaf. Whoosh, endless energy of heaven and earth rushed toward Chu Luyue. At this moment, that water droplet finally transformed into a transparent zither score. Clang! The sound of a zither came out from Chu Luyue's body. Whoosh! Her posture was straight, and her sword was pointed forward. Now, it's your turn. A clear and powerful voice echoed in the entire main hall. Finally, the blurry figure gradually became clear. Then, a low and hoarse voice came out. I've also been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as he finished speaking, a god domain that was a mixture of silver and crimson rushed out with a loud rumble. Chu Luyue was shocked. That aura was exactly the same as her god realm. At this moment, an earth-shattering commotion broke out in the divine ruins world. Several broken black divine bodies flew out from various places and went straight to the illusory god palace. Chu Luyue's heart was suddenly set off by stormy waves. In the door of the Peach Blossom Dock, a face gradually appeared in the mirror. She was incomparably beautiful, with cold eyes and unparalleled nobility. But those eyes were as deep as the eternal night of 10,000 years. Yueshan, welcome back. Chapter 2485. Yueshan, welcome back. These words came from the gradually clear figure in front of her. It was still a low and hoarse voice, but it sent chills down Chu Luyue's spine. What? What does this mean? He had been waiting for her to return to the illusory god palace. But, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. At this moment, the black divine bodies turned into flowing lights and flew in from outside the divine gate, gathering together. The silhouette gradually became clearer. That person wore a black robe and a huge hood covered his face, making it impossible to see through. But when Chu Luyue looked at it, she felt that the figure was very familiar. It was clearly, very similar to her. Looking at the intertwining silver and red divine realm around him, her heart beat even more violently. An extremely preposterous conjecture entered her mind, and she couldn't get rid of it. The battle 10,000 years ago had actually erupted very suddenly. At that time, she was the divine master, and the 2 high priests and 13 divine envoys were in charge of the illusory god palace. Everything was normal. Suddenly, one day, someone killed his way into the illusory god palace. Without any warning, he suddenly appeared just like that. That person's attire was the same as today. He was covered up tightly. Even though she had fought with him for a long time, she still couldn't see his face. He seemed to have prepared for a long time and knew all of her vital points and moves like the back of his hand. What was even more shocking was that at that time, a considerable portion of the illusory god palace had already submitted to him. It was just that this was done very discreetly, so she hadn't noticed. In the end, a fierce battle forced Yi Ling to self-immolate and burn half of the illusory god palace. But that wasn't the end. In order to protect the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she hid a trace of Yi Ling's aura in a golden feather and sent it down to the Divine Ruins world to hide in the Phoenix Temple. And she herself led many supreme gods to fight with him in the god-slaying tomb. That battle was extremely fierce and many gods fell, including herself. In her memory, the other party's divine body was also cut apart at the last moment. And that was because Diwu Zhangzi suddenly betrayed them. This was also why he hated Diwu Zhangzi to this day and imprisoned him in the illusory god ocean to be tortured. But she didn't know what happened after that. Including their divine bodies being suppressed in different parts of the Divine Ruins world, Dugu Mobao and the other two being trapped in the Red Moon Desert, the other party seizing the illusory god palace, choosing 13 divine envoys, and reversing right and wrong. Actually, she didn't understand anything. Most importantly, during the battle back then, his opponent had not unleashed his deity domain at all. That was why she was so shocked when she sensed the aura of a god domain that was almost exactly the same. And now, this figure, the identity of the other party was almost obvious. At this moment, the voice seemed to contain a smile as it floated into his ears. Yueshan, since you and I were born in this world, we should be on equal footing. What's the difference between you and me sitting on the seat of the Divine Master? Chu Liuyue's pupils shrank. Born in the same world. What did that mean? Walla. The sound of something shattering suddenly rang out. Dugu Mobao, who had been silent for a long time and didn't give any response, suddenly tore open the space, broke the mirror, and stepped out. With the zither music score fused and Yueshan returned, as the high priest, his strength naturally rose as well. You're just an evil spirit transformed from a shadow. How can you be compared to Yueshan? Dugu Mobao's cold and majestic voice exploded in everyone's hearts like a clap of thunder. The current divine master of the illusory god palace was her shadow? Then, everyone was stunned. Ever since the divine fire of the chaotic holy jade was extinguished, they had already realized that there was something wrong with this divine master. And after Chu Liuyue's continuous questioning and easily taking back the Star Road's Herb Mountain and Lightning Pool, everyone was even more certain of this conjecture. At this point, everyone could see that Chu Liuyue was the true divine master. It was only because of the turmoil 10,000 years ago that this person had seized everything. But no matter how much they thought about it, they never expected that this was an evil spirit transformed from her shadow. Actually, even the 13 divine envoys didn't know about this. Because they had fallen together with Chu Liuyue back then. So, only Dugu Mobao and the other two knew about this. No, there was one more person. Chu Liuyue suddenly turned around and looked at Rongxiu. Ripples seemed to be surging in the depths of his cold and deep eyes. But his expression was still calm. Obviously, he had known about this for a long time. Then, the sound of something shattering rang out again. Lan Shao walked out of the mirror and stretched with a faint smile on his face. The high priest is right. Who do you think you are to be on the same level as Yueshan? Pfft. Why don't you take a good look at yourself? No matter what, you have been the divine master for more than 10,000 years. But after such a long time, you can't even ignite the divine fire and have to rely on the power of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan to barely maintain it. Don't you feel ashamed? He snorted and looked up slightly at Mu Qinghe, who was kneeling on the ground outside the door. In addition, the people you've chosen are too lacking in standards. We didn't even have to do anything, and the 13 divine envoys have already taken care of them. You still want to be the divine master? Are you worthy? These words were indeed heart-wrenching. But when the evil spirit heard it, it didn't seem to care much. It only said to Chu Luyue, Yueshan, if you want to take back the palace of the illusory god, fight with me. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. One battle will determine life and death. Do you agree or not? Chapter 2486. As its voice fell, it suddenly raised its head. A pair of scarlet eyes suddenly opened. Cruel and fierce. It was exactly the same as the eye in the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luyue gripped the Star Darkness sword in her hand tightly as a cold smile slowly appeared on her lips. All right. New grudges and old grudges, today, we'll settle them all. Chi. The sword energy was biting cold as it pierced through the air. The surrounding space, because of this extremely strong power, began to crazily collapse. Almost at the same time, a sword appeared in the evil spirit's hand. The appearance of that sword was extremely similar to the Star Darkness sword, only the color of the sword was different. Black and dark red intertwined, and a cold and bloody aura filled the air. It raised its sword. Kang! The two weapons clashed. In an instant, Chu Luyue could faintly hear a sharp and mournful cry coming from the sword. Terrifying fluctuations surged out in all directions. Boom! The space around the evil spirit collapsed. In the next moment, it took a step forward and closed in on Chu Luyue. A numb and dull pain came from her hand. The web between her thumb and forefinger split open, and sticky and sweet blood continuously flowed out. Chu Luyue's palm suddenly became slippery and sticky. She pursed her lips and quickly poured her god power into the Star Darkness sword. Mu Qinghe was not her opponent, and under her sword, she did not even have the slightest ability to resist. But, the one in front of her was much stronger than Mu Qinghe. As the two were in a deadlock, the ground under Chu Luyue's feet also began to crack, quickly spreading to the surroundings. At this time, Rong Xiu suddenly looked at Mu Hongyu. Mu Hongyu was originally nervously looking at the battlefield, but when she felt this gaze, she instinctively turned around. Meeting Rong Xiu's gaze, her heart suddenly shook. Then, she quietly looked around and silently retreated. At this moment, Jian Fengqi, Xiao Ran, and the others were standing together. Sensing the movement beside him, Jian Fengqi was about to turn his head to look when he suddenly heard Mu Hongyu whisper, "Don't move. I will be back soon." Jian Fengqi immediately understood and stopped moving. He only frowned slightly. Of course he knew what she was going to do. Then, he held her hand and squeezed it neither too hard nor too lightly. Mu Hongyu felt warmth in her heart. She took half a step back, completely hiding behind Jian Fengqi and the others. In the next moment, she completely disappeared on the spot. Mirage God Sea. Dark clouds gathered and the waves surged. It was gloomy between heaven and earth. It was eerie and cold. Yu Jiu was searching the surface of the sea. Big Brother is really something. He didn't even tell me the specific place, he scratched his head. Logically speaking, since it was his sword, he should be able to successfully summon it back. There was no need for him to go through so much trouble to find it. Why did he fall into the Mirage God Sea? The pressure in the Mirage God Sea was heavy, and every wave contained extremely shocking power. As a result, this sea naturally formed a huge barrier, preventing him from summoning his sword back. He could only search bit by bit like this. Oh right, Senior Diwu seems to be here too. Thinking of this, Yu Jiu clenched her fists and planned to rush down. Wait! A voice suddenly sounded. Yu Jiu turned around and was shocked when she saw who it was. Hongyu? Why are you here? Mu Hongyu walked out of the void and quickly stepped forward. I am here to save Master. Yu Jiu was stunned for a moment and quickly reacted. Her master was naturally Diwu Zhangzi. There are countless intersecting spaces under this sea. It is not easy to deal with. Although Yu Jiu was now a heavenly god, she was naturally inferior to her in this aspect. Yujio thought for a moment and nodded. Then I will wait here. If there are any problems, call me immediately. By the way, after you go down, if you see a sword, remember to tell me. Mu Hongyu sized him up and asked in understanding, what's wrong? That is, your sword? Yujio nodded. No problem. Mu Hongyu agreed without hesitation. Or I can help you bring it up directly. Sigh, that won't do. That sword recognizes its master. If you take it rashly, it will be dangerous, Yujio said quickly. Mu Hongyu blinked. I see. All right then. If I really see it, I will tell you immediately. Thank you, thank you. Yujio was very grateful. Mu Hongyu had a special physique. She would definitely find it faster than him. Splash! Mu Hongyu did not hesitate and rushed directly into the Mirage God Sea. She had been here several times before and was familiar with the place. She almost did not encounter any obstacles and soon reached the depths of the sea and saw the ball of light. The surrounding space forces were still squeezing and intersecting with each other. Fortunately, this was not a big problem for Mu Hongyu, who had already ascended to the heavens and broken through to the gods. Her figure was extremely agile as she shuttled through the space forces. She was like a real fish, smooth and natural. Bailing had already died, so there was no one guarding this place. It did not take her much effort to get close to the ball of light. When she got close, she realized that this ball of light was actually an extremely complicated Xian formation. The radiance on it was resplendent and flowing light surged, forming a semicircular barrier. Inside the Xian formation, a person was sitting quietly. It was Diwu Zhangzi. Mu Hongyu's heart beat quickly. Master! Hearing the voice, Diwu Zhangzi moved and looked up in disbelief. When he saw that it was Mu Hongyu, he was even more shocked. Hongyu? Why are you here? Mu Hongyu wanted to get closer, but the power of the barrier was too strong, and she couldn't move forward for a moment. Thus, she could only stop and explain. Master, I'm here to save you. After being imprisoned for too long and suffering all kinds of torture, Diwu Zhangzi's figure was even more illusory, and his aura was much weaker than before. He was almost holding on with his last breath. Mu Hongyu's heart ached. However, Diwu Zhangzi said, "It's too dangerous here. Leave quickly." His expression was rather anxious. Mu Hongyu's eyes reddened. She took a deep breath and smiled. Don't worry, Master. Lu Yu has already returned to the palace of the illusory god. As long as the culprit is killed, everything will be fine. If not for that, she wouldn't have had the chance to come here directly. Diwu Zhangzi was stunned and only came back to his senses after a while. You mean, Yu has already, Mu Hongyu nodded vigorously. Yes. Most of the god's envoys are dead, and only the evil spirit from the palace of the illusory god is left. Senior Dugu Mobao and Senior Lan Shao have also come out. Diwu Zhangzi was trapped here and cut off from all contact with the outside world, so he did not know what was happening outside. Now that he heard Mu Hongyu mention it, he was stunned. His lips moved, and he asked, "She fought with that evil spirit?" Chapter 2487. That's right. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists and said firmly. That person has taken over the place. This time, he'll definitely die in Lu Yu's hands. Because of the barrier, she couldn't see Diwu Zhangzi's expression clearly. After a while, he said, "Hongyu, give me a hand and push all these spaces back to their original positions. Then, this barrier can be opened." This was indeed the best time to escape. Okay. Mu Hongyu nodded seriously. Diwu Zhangzi pointed in a certain direction. Move 3 inches to the left. Mu Hongyu held her breath and slowly reached out with one hand. Sure enough, a black line appeared in the air. That was a spatial crack that would only appear when the overlapping spaces were stacked on top of each other. She carefully pushed the power of space away. Although these spaces were all transparent, she could clearly feel the difference between each space, so it wasn't difficult to do. Diwu Zhangzi pointed to the side. That, move back 4 inches. Mu Hongyu pursed her lips and did as she was told. Illusion God Palace. After a short stalemate, the swords separated. Chu Luiyue took a step back and stabilized herself. However, the person opposite her didn't move at all. Seeing this, everyone became more and more nervous. This was the first time the two had officially exchanged blows, and Chu Luiyue was actually at a disadvantage. Boom! A reddish-gold flame suddenly burned and wrapped around the Star Spectre sword. Then, without hesitation, she slashed down again. Clang! The evil spirit blocked the sword in front of her, and Chu Luiyue's sword just happened to touch the body of her opponent's sword. In the next moment, the reddish-gold flame that was burning crazily quickly spread towards the black-red longsword. Chi-chi! The scorching heat surrounded it, as if something was being quickly burned. A burnt and unpleasant smell rushed out from it. The miserable screams became even more ear-piercing. At this moment, the evil spirit suddenly raised her hand. Chi-chi, the two swords crisscrossed and scraped, stirring up a string of sparks. Chu Luiyue hurriedly flew backward when the terrifying force came crashing down. He placed his sword on the ground. Her soft and slender waist was at an incredible angle. The sword chi streaked across the air above her body. A strand of black hair was silently severed and fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue's eyes hardened. He twisted his waist, flicked his wrist, and stabbed out diagonally, straight at the evil spirit's chest. Bang! Her opponent's reaction was extremely fast, as if he had already anticipated her move. With a backhand, he parried her attack with his sword. Chu Luiyue gritted her teeth. Just like 10,000 years ago, the other party knew almost all of her moves like the back of his hand. If this continued, it would be extremely difficult to win. At this moment, the person opposite him suddenly made the first move. Whoosh! The sword slashed down. Chu Luiyue held his sword in front of him. Kacha! A slight cracking sound came from the Star Darkness sword. Chu Luiyue was startled and looked down. She saw that on the Star Darkness sword, there was indeed an extremely thin crack. Her heart suddenly sank. This Star Darkness sword was something she had personally refined in the Peach Blossom Cove. For most people, its level was already extremely high, but it was clearly not enough to deal with this person in front of her. Yueshan, 10,000 years have passed, but you're getting worse and worse. You don't even have a suitable sword? The evil spirit sneered. Shengguan Jing immediately said, Use mine. Saying so, he was about to hand over the sword he had refined before. After all, it was a sacred weapon, so it should be able to last for a while. Chu Luiyue shook her head, a trace of decisiveness flashing through her eyes. Then, with a tap of her foot, her figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Shengguan Jing was extremely nervous. Su Li comforted, don't worry, she definitely has her own ideas. At this time, no one else would be able to help. This was a life-and-death battle between her and the evil spirit. On the side, Tang Ke sensed something and suddenly raised her head to look outside, a trace of shock flashing through her eyes. Yueshan, this is, boom. A loud sound suddenly came from the sky outside. Everyone's heart shook, and they all looked over. A silver Tianlei suddenly flew out from the lightning pool, heading straight for the sky above the main hall of the illusory god palace. Then, a second one, a third one. In just a few breaths, a flickering galaxy appeared in the sky above. This Milky Way rose from the lightning pool and pierced through the clouds. It was as if it was going to tear open a hole in the dark sky. At this time, a slender and exquisite figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the main hall. It was Chu Luyue. She raised the star darkness sword in her hand. Go! With a command, countless Tianlei suddenly descended. All of them sank into the star darkness sword. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. What is she doing? The Tianlei in the lightning pool seems to be coming here. Look! The golden Tianlei is also coming. Could it be, she's going to reforge at this time? It was unknown who said this in the crowd, but it immediately made everyone suck in a cold breath. How is that possible? A divine artifact that has already been refined can't be refined again. But she's now. All kinds of discussions were going on, but Chu Luyue ignored them all. She stared at the star darkness sword in front of her. A silver Tianlei fell and quickly merged into it. A faint light flashed by. Endless Tianlei, covering the sky and covering the earth, finally poured into it. At the same time, the reddish-gold flame also burned fiercely. Suddenly, a bone-chilling coldness poured out from the illusory god palace. The porch was quickly covered with a thin layer of frost. Then, this coldness spread to the steps. The illusory god palace began to freeze. The void shook, and the evil spirit's figure silently appeared in front of Chu Luyue. Under the dark sky, the two stood facing each other. Don't you think it's too late to refine artifacts at this time? The low and hoarse voice carried a trace of undisguised mockery. As soon as the voice fell, it raised the sword again. Screech! A clear and dignified phoenix cry suddenly sounded. A huge reddish-gold figure quickly swooped down. Everywhere it passed, flames burned, and even the ice that was spreading on the ground below also melted. Chi! In the blink of an eye, a sea of fire separated the two. Dumpling's eyes stared at the figure, her fighting spirit surging. The evil spirit looked at her, suddenly laughed, and said, "Life-binding contract. No wonder I didn't notice it back then. It seems that Yi Ling really has high hopes for you, even giving you this last chance of survival." Dumpling's eyes were slightly shocked. "It seems that you still don't know, back then, Yi Ling and Yueshan also signed a life-binding contract. And this life-binding contract isn't something that just anyone can sign. There's only one in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Chapter 2488. Similarly, Yueshan can only sign one contract. When Yi Ling died, his remaining aura was left behind by Yueshan in the Phoenix God Mountain. And because of the existence of this aura, the life contract has remained until now. Previously, I always thought that Yi Ling would use this life contract to return. But I didn't expect that he would transfer this contract to you. The evil spirit laughed. Perhaps, he also knows that the remains buried in Phoenix Cry Mountain can no longer help Yueshan ignite the divine fire. With just a few words, Tuanzi was completely shocked on the spot. This means, she subconsciously turned back and looked at Chu Luyue. Their eyes met. Chu Luyue closed his eyes to hide the turbulence in his eyes. Dumpling's heart suddenly sank. This is real. That voice seemed to carry some kind of bewitching power. Look at Phoenix Cry Mountain. Dumpling's body stiffened as she turned to look at Phoenix Cry Mountain behind the illusory god palace. It was steep and steep. Balls of reddish gold flames burned silently on it. The moment you opened your 9 meridians, Yi Ling's body and soul were truly destroyed. As the evil spirit spoke, he suddenly raised his sword and swung it down fiercely. Seeing this, Mao Zhen was shocked. No! However, his voice was quickly drowned out by the deafening roar. Chi, boom! The sword aura flew to Phoenix Cry Mountain and crashed heavily. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountain shook as endless flames soared into the sky. The huge Phoenix Cry Mountain began to collapse. However, at this moment, a dragon's roar suddenly came from the foot of Phoenix Cry Mountain. Hearing this dragon's roar, everyone was stunned. The evil spirit said that Yi Ling's corpse was buried under Phoenix Cry Mountain. Then, what was this dragon's roar about? Soon, the entire Phoenix Cry Mountain was razed to the ground. A deep pit suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. There were actually two skeletons buried in it. One was the reddish-gold heavenly phoenix, which was Yi Ling back then. The other was clearly the great phoenix dragon. It went without saying who the owner of this skeleton was. The ancestor of the great phoenix dragon race, Mao Yu. Flames burned in the surroundings, and the high temperature almost caused the space to distort. Right at this moment, another sword chi arrived in an instant. When the astonishing pressure descended, the two skeletons began to be silently crushed into powder. Dumpling was shocked. Mao Zhen quickly rushed over, both shocked and furious. "What are you doing? Ancestor Mao Yu suppressed Feng Ming Mountain for 10,000 years for you, you. Mao Yu did it for me?" The evil spirit sneered as if it had heard a joke. Back then, if it hadn't used this as a condition, would your great Phoenix Dragon clan have been able to survive until today? 10,000 years ago, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon and the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix were both ancient divine beasts. However, Goddess Xiaofan favored the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix more. Not only did she stay at Phoenix Cry Mountain, she even signed a life contract with Yi Ling. But even so, Mao Yu refused to join forces with it no matter what. It made a mental note of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Later on, when Yi Ling died, it used all its means to take back Yi Ling's remains and buried them under Phoenix Cry Mountain. It knew about the existence of the life contract, so it always thought that as long as it guarded Yi Ling's remains, it could weaken Goddess Xiaofan's power in the future and increase its chances of winning. Moreover, Yi Ling had opened his 9th meridian. Even though he was dead, his remains still contained an extremely shocking power. In the past few years, it had also ordered people to bring back the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clansmen and used the power of Phoenix Cry Mountain to forcefully open their meridians. Unfortunately, the results were not satisfactory. Later on, it gradually gave up. It only collected the power of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's bloodline from time to continue burning the divine fire of the Chaos Holy Jade. At that time, because the power in Yi Ling's remains could not be underestimated, it found Mao Yu and threatened her with the lives of her clansmen, forcing her to commit suicide. Together with them, they were suppressed at Phoenix Cry Mountain to suppress Yi Ling's power. Mao Zhen felt as if she was struck by lightning. What did you say? Ancestor, didn't surrender to you of his own accord? The evil spirit waved the sword in its hand and smiled casually. Only now do you understand? Since Dumpling had already opened her 9th meridian and Yi Ling had completely fallen, there was no need to keep Mao Yu's remains. As for the great Phoenix Dragon clan, it also did not take it to heart. Therefore, it said those words very casually, frankly, and with a sense of lofty arrogance. Mao Zhen was completely stunned. After that chaos, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan became a sinful clan, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan also left the Illusion God Palace after receiving Taizu Mao Yu's orders. All the clansmen thought that Mao Yu did this to avoid conflict, so they never returned to the Illusion God Palace after that. Until this time, when the Heaven Gate opened and Mao Zhen returned to pay respects to her ancestors. Including him, all the Great Phoenix Dragon clan leaders thought that ancestor Mao Yu had made that choice herself. Because of this, he had been feeling very complicated ever since he came to the Illusion God Palace. He never expected that it was the evil spirit who threatened the lives of his clansmen to force Mao Yu to do this. Indescribable anger and hatred instantly surged from the bottom of his heart. Mao Zhen's body trembled slightly. Then, a shocking power suddenly exploded from his body. Roar! Mao Zhen transformed into her true form. The next moment, her dragon tail swung fiercely at the evil spirit. Almost at the same time, Dumpling also reacted. She flapped her wings and flew up, waving 2 fireballs. 2 ancient divine beasts attacked from the left and right. However, the evil spirit did not seem to panic. With a thought, the silver-red divine territory surged and spread out. In an instant, it formed a boundary around his body. Dumpling and Mao Yu's attack power was directly reduced by more than half. I said before that Yi Ling and Mao Yu were not my match back then, let alone the 2 of you. As his voice fell, that silver-red divine territory surged like a river and spread even further away. It seemed that he intended to directly include Tuanzi and Mao Zhen in it. However, at this moment, a soft sound suddenly came. Clang! It seemed to be the sound of a stone rolling on the ground. Dumpling turned back and saw an irregularly shaped stone the size of a fist suddenly rolling to her side. Clang! Another stone rolled to the side. 3rd stone. 4th stone. More and more stones flew out from Chu Liuyue's universe ring. In the blink of an eye, these stones had already scattered and occupied half of the sky. The silver-red divine territory's surging speed began to visibly slow down. The evil spirit suddenly said, "This is a battle between you and me. If Mao Zhen attacks, it will be breaking the rules." Mao Zhen was extremely angry. "You killed our ancestor. This hatred, the great Void Phoenix Dragon clan, is absolutely irreconcilable with you." The evil spirit seemed to laugh. "You want to attack?" Before Mao Zhen could say anything, she heard a cold and harsh voice. "He can't fight with you, but I should be qualified." Chapter 2489. That was Zichen's voice. He moved and arrived beside Mao Zhen in the blink of an eye. "Senior Mao Zhen, leave the rest to me." Mao Zhen was unwilling. Seeing his ancestors' remains being destroyed with his own eyes had already made him extremely angry. Now that he knew the truth, he was even more furious. All he wanted to do now was to kill her completely. But it was indeed inappropriate for him to interfere in this battle. Otherwise, he would be giving others something to use against him. Zichen was Chu Liuyue's contracted magical beast, so he naturally had the right to interfere. Mao Zhen tried his best to calm the waves in his heart and finally retreated. The evil spirit looked at Zichen. "You're just a 3-eyed eagle that has fused with the power of a great phoenix dragon's bloodline. How dare you be so arrogant? Even if Mao Zhen came, only death would await her, let alone you. It's not over yet. The outcome is unknown. It's too early for you to say these words." After Zichen finished speaking, a purple gold eye suddenly opened between his eyebrows. The surrounding silver-red divine realm was torn apart, perhaps because it was clamped by those stones. At this time, the red-gold flames were also approaching the evil spirit. The battle ahead was fierce, and Chu Liuyue's side was also splashing with sparks. Streams of Tianlei came one after another, constantly tempering the star-darkness sword in her hand. That sword was almost like a bottomless pit, absorbing all the Tianlei and had no intention of stopping. She has already swallowed thousands of Tianlei, right? Why isn't it over yet? Did all the power contained in those Tianlei really go into that sword? How shocking is that? Maybe, she can really succeed? Who knows? The Tianlei in the lightning pool has already been reduced by 1/3. Could it be that she wanted to make the entire lightning pool empty? All kinds of discussions were going on. Countless pairs of eyes were staring at the sky, not daring to miss a single thing. A faint pressure gradually spread out from the star spectre sword. Illusionary God C. Time passed slowly. Under Diwu Zhang's guidance, Mu Hongyu finally pushed the spatial energy to its original position. Of course, during this process, she was inevitably injured, and there were many wounds on her body. This was especially true for his hands, which had been squeezed and cut by several spatial forces, causing dozens of bloody wounds to appear on them. It looked like it was already badly mutilated. Diwu Zhangze's heart ached. However, Mu Hongyu didn't seem to care. Her eyes were still bright and full of fighting spirit. Finally, after some work, the pressure on the barrier began to gradually decrease. The originally somewhat dazzling light also dimmed a little. This made Mu Hongyu even more excited. She began to concentrate even more on moving and clearing away the last of the spatial energy. Crack. Following this crisp sound, a crack finally appeared on the barrier. Mu Hongyu was overjoyed. Diwu Zhangze immediately said, "Hongyu, step back." "Yes." Mu Hongyu responded. With a tap of her toes, she quickly retreated. Diwu Zhangze waved his sleeves. In the next moment, the crack began to spread rapidly to the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, it was like a spider web crawling all over. Diwu Zhangze held his breath and focused, crossing his hands in front of him. Boom! The barrier collapsed. At the same time, the Xian formation under Diwu Zhangze's feet also began to crack. With a move of his body, he rushed out of it. "Master!" Mu Hongyu finally heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, she glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw something flickering under the rapidly collapsing Xian formation. She was stunned and took a closer look. Then, she realized that under the Xian formation, there was actually a sword. Diwu Zhangze originally planned to take her away, but in the blink of an eye, he saw that she was staring in a certain direction, entranced. He followed her line of sight and was also shocked. "Why is this sword here?" Mu Hongyu turned her head. "Master, you know it? This is Yu Jiu's sword," Diwu Zhangze said. Mu Hongyu's heart suddenly lit up. "Really? That's too much of a coincidence. Yu Jiu even asked me to help find this sword just now. I didn't expect to bump into it here." Diwu Zhangze frowned slightly, then sneered. What a painstaking effort, who would have thought that this sword was hidden here? If Mu Hongyu hadn't come to save him, no one would be able to find this place even after hundreds or thousands of years. Mu Hongyu said, "I'll go get the sword." "Wait." Diwu Zhangze stopped her. "This sword is extremely sharp and powerful. Ordinary people can't touch it. Call Yu Jiu over and get it personally." Mu Hongyu was stunned for a moment, but she didn't ask further. "Okay." As she spoke, a bell suddenly appeared in her hand, and she shook it gently. Ding! The crisp sound of the bell instantly spread far and wide. Yu Jiu was waiting on the silver bridge. When he heard the sound of the bell, he was instantly delighted. So fast. He moved and quickly headed in the direction of the sound of the bell. The Xian formation suppressing Diwu Zhangze had already collapsed. The chaotic spatial power under the sea had also been adjusted and restored, becoming orderly again. Yu Jiu's journey was practically unimpeded. When he arrived at the depths of the sea, he quickly saw Mu Hongyu and Diwu Zhangze beside her. Yu Jiu approached them, and his expression changed slightly. "Senior Diwu, his body was translucent, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot." Diwu Zhangze waved his hand. "I'm fine. Go and get the sword first." Yu Jiu thought for a moment, then nodded and headed toward the center of the collapsed Xian formation. He held the sword hilt with both hands, and his expression became serious. Then, he slowly and firmly took it out. In an instant, brilliant light shone. Mu Hongyu widened her eyes slightly. This was a huge green sword. The sword's spine was thick and heavy, but the sword's edge was extremely sharp. It was 8 feet long, slightly taller than Yu Jiu. Some strange patterns were engraved on the sword's body. Mu Hongyu looked at it and felt that it was vaguely familiar. After taking a closer look, she suddenly thought of something and pointed at the huge green sword. Why are the patterns on it so similar to the ones on the barrier at the heaven gate? Wuxia was touching the sword lovingly, and he was so excited that tears almost filled his eyes. Only the heavens knew how sad it was for him to hold a small wooden sword every day for all these years. Hearing Mu Hongyu's words, he snorted. Of course it's because this sword was also made by Big Brother. Mu Hongyu was stunned for a moment before she suddenly understood what was going on. So the barrier at the heaven gate was his. Wuxia flicked his finger on the sword's body. Buzz, a deep and heavy sword sound spread far and wide. He stroked his chin in satisfaction. It's not just the heaven gate. The entire barrier of the illusory god palace was made by Zhen. Chapter 2490. Mu Hongyu sucked in a cold breath. She had long known that Zhen was powerful, but she didn't expect him to be. The 13 Yu-guards were the 13 divine envoys of the illusory god palace. This had been proven just now. There was no doubt about it. And it was obvious that they each had their own duties. But before this, because Zhen had never appeared, Mu Hongyu didn't think of him. After hearing Wuxia's words, she understood. She couldn't help but be shocked. That's right. In that case, he's the real first divine envoy. And this illusory god ocean, is he also in charge of it? Wuxia gave her an admiring look. Diwu Zhangzi looked up and said, "We have to go back as soon as possible." Boom! Bang! An incomparably powerful force attacked, and Zichen's body fell heavily to the ground. After a series of battles, his entire body was covered in wounds and bloodstains. If I'm not wrong, there's a wing bone of the great phoenix dragon in your body. The evil spirit looked down at Zichen. How inappropriate. After saying that, it flicked its wrist, and the black and red sword suddenly flew out and went straight for Zichen's left shoulder. Whoosh! A ball of reddish-gold flames suddenly swept out and blocked the sword's path. The evil spirit didn't seem to care and reached out from its sleeve. It was a jet-black hand. It was the hand that had been suppressed under the 1,000-wine mountain. Then, its finger gently pointed forward. A black light instantly flew out like a sharp arrow. Dumpling had a bad feeling and immediately wanted to stop it. Zichen was shocked. Dumpling. Be careful. Swoosh. The black light flew past Dumpling's wings and went straight for Zichen. He was about to move when he suddenly saw the silver-red divine realm suddenly descend from the sky. At the same time, a cold and powerful pressure crushed toward him, making him unable to move. Then, the black light arrived in an instant. Whoosh! Zichen's shoulder was instantly pierced. His shoulder blade was instantly shattered by this force. Zichen's face turned pale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, the black light continued to wreak havoc in his body, madly devouring his strength. Zichen's aura quickly weakened. Seeing this, Dumpling's eyes burned with flames. In the Red Moon Desert, such a scene had already happened once. Unexpectedly, there was actually a second time. Whoosh! She flapped her wings and a gust of wind rose. The reddish-gold flames in the sky moved with the wind, constantly devouring the energy in the surroundings, forming a sea of fire that surrounded the evil spirit. Chi-chi, under the burning of the flames, the sword emitted a series of strange sounds. Gradually, the blood color on it faded bit by bit. Following such a change, the terrifying aura of the sword was also being weakened. Dumpling perked up. The other party didn't seem to be completely unafraid of the flames. The evil spirit seemed to have sensed the danger as well, and the pressure around it became even stronger. Those scarlet eyes looked at Chu Luyue. At this time, the Star Spectre sword in front of her was still being refined. The crack had been completely repaired and could no longer be seen. Only bits of starlight were left, quietly flickering. Like the stars in the dark night, they were shining brightly. At this time, 2/3 of the Tianlei in the lightning pool had already been merged into the sword. It had to end this quickly. Thinking of this, it attacked again. Several black lights flew out at the same time. Dumpling spread her wings, and flames soared into the sky, defending with all her might. Suddenly, the evil spirit raised its hand. That silver-red god domain suddenly dissipated. This move came very suddenly. Chu Liuyue's 3000 god domain had been in a stalemate with it. Now that the power of this god domain was suddenly torn apart, the side that lost the power to contend, Chu Liuyue's power instantly went out of control. Taking advantage of this moment, the evil spirit moved and appeared behind Chu Liuyue. Without hesitation, it punched out, going straight for Chu Liuyue's back. Dumpling's eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of shock. A biting cold wind attacked from behind, and Chu Liuyue's heart instantly tensed up. At this time, Zichen suddenly broke free from the restraints of the god domain and rushed forward. Boom! This punch landed squarely on Zichen's chest. You overestimate yourself. The low and hoarse voice was filled with undisguised mockery and contempt. Then, everyone saw a cloud of black fog suddenly spread out from the evil spirit's hand, instantly enveloping Zichen's body. Vaguely, they could even hear the sound of bones shattering. Blood that was suffused with black gas gradually dripped down. Bang! Dumpling rushed over as fast as she could. However, it was already too late. The cloud of black fog quickly shrank and finally dissipated. Only a translucent remnant soul was left, bound by the evil spirit's palm-sized black cage and held tightly in its hand. A black feather came with the wind and quietly floated down. There were a few scarlet spots on it. Then, the evil spirit looked up at Tuanzi and said slowly, "I'm sorry." A crimson gold heavenly phoenix with 9 meridians opened. It's really rare. It's a pity to kill it like this. If it hadn't been for this, it would have killed Tuanzi long ago instead of dragging it out until now. But, Chu Liuyue's sword was about to be completed. No matter what, this battle couldn't continue waiting. This crimson gold heavenly phoenix probably wouldn't submit even if it died. Moreover, it was very likely that it would burn its bloodline power to nothing before it made a move. Then, there was no need to hold back. Thinking of this, the evil spirit stretched out its hand and clenched the air. An extremely powerful suction force suddenly attacked. The blood in Dumpling's body also began to surge rapidly, almost bursting out of her body. A hint of determination flashed in her eyes, and she actually rushed forward with this force. However, at this moment, an extremely resplendent light suddenly erupted from the star darkness sword. The lightning pool dried up, and the last Tianlei also merged into it. This light soared into the sky and instantly pierced through the dark sky. The dark clouds, wind, and thunder were blown away, leaving behind only this brilliant radiance that spread across the entire sky. For a moment, it was as bright as day. This light and pressure were too strong, almost making people unable to look directly at it and unconsciously submit. A hint of shock flashed through the depths of the evil spirit's eyes. At this moment, Chu Liuyue's wrist flicked. A crimson gold flame flew out and completely blocked the evil spirit's power. At the same time, a tongue of flame rushed in front of the evil spirit and wrapped around its wrist. The blazing and terrifying power instantly made the evil spirit throw out the small black cage in its hand. Dumpling immediately rushed over and grabbed the thing tightly before returning to Chu Liuyue's side. She looked at Chu Liuyue with red eyes. Zichen, Chu Liuyue gave her a comforting look. Then, she raised her sword with both hands. The sound of a zither came from her body. At the same time, an extremely dazzling light suddenly erupted from the Pantheon record. Chapter 2491. Noticing the commotion, many people raised their heads and looked over. Why is there such a huge commotion in the Pantheon record? No one should continue to ascend to the heavens and become a god now, right? Could this be? Who else could it be? Today, all 13 divine envoys had returned. The 2 priests had also recovered their identities, and their names had appeared in the first volume of the Pantheon record. However, there was only one person whose name had not appeared until now. Yueshan. She didn't even need to think to know that the name under the light was hers. Strange, why would it be now? Everyone was puzzled. Logically speaking, her name should have been revealed as soon as the bloodline totem completely emerged. However, it did not. It had even been delayed until now. Countless pairs of eyes stared intently at the Pantheon record, eagerly and curiously waiting for her name to appear. Rong Xiao stood in front of the main hall with his hands behind his back. The Pantheon record floated silently beside him. He tilted his head slightly and swept his gaze across it, finally landing on the bright light. A name was faintly discernible on it. He slowly tightened his grip. As the light gradually dissipated, everyone could finally see the name clearly. However, they soon realized that something was wrong. Because that name seemed to have been burned. Everyone could only vaguely see the word Yueshan. Other than that, they could not see anything else. That small charred mark concealed her surname. Many people looked at each other. What was going on? Why would such a thing happen in the Pantheon record? When the evil spirit saw the name that was burned, a look of shock suddenly flashed across its eyes. Just as it was about to say something, the zither music had already sounded. At the same time, countless stones rolled out of Chu Liuyue's hands again. A surging and oppressive fighting spirit surged. In an instant, the atmosphere of the entire world seemed to have changed. Cold silence. Austere. Boundless. Countless images flashed through Chu Liuyue's mind. It was the battle 10,000 years ago. Countless cultivators followed her and fought to the death for her. However, although they were dead, their fighting spirit remained. There seemed to be a thick smell of blood in the air. The coarse wind swept in from all directions, almost tearing one's skin apart. His blood was boiling hot, and the fire was blazing. His fighting spirit surged, and the sound of the zither rang out. Chu Liyue looked at the evil spirit, his gaze cold, dignified, and disdainful. In the past, you ambushed the illusory god palace, forced Yi Ling to immolate himself, and killed thousands of my deities. After that, you even occupied the illusory god palace and inverted right and wrong. Now, let's return it all together. As soon as she finished speaking, the sword in her hand fell heavily. As the sword slashed down, it seemed to bring down the radiance that filled the sky along with it. In the blink of an eye, boundless battle intent surged, blotting out the sky and swallowing the evil spirit. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Affected by the sword chi, a deep gully instantly appeared on the ground. Countless people's expressions changed. This strike, chi. 3,000 sword energies crisscrossed, slashing at the evil spirit's body. Chi. Chu Liyue fiercely threw out the star darkness sword, piercing through his chest and nailing him to the Saint Chaos Jade. Flames leaped, burning brightly. An extremely painful and hoarse cry rang out instantly. Resentment, coldness, countless people's hearts involuntarily trembled when they heard this cry. But very quickly, this cry was shattered by the sound of a zither. This zither sound came from Chu Liyue's body, drifting to every corner of the illusory god palace. If there was no zither, she would use herself as the zither. If there were no strings, she would use the power of heaven and earth as the strings. Wherever the zither sound went, it would become her divine domain. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared outside the heaven gate. When Wu Yao saw who it was, he was stunned. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s, wearing a sky-blue brocade robe. His figure was tall, and his appearance was incomparably handsome. His entire body exuded a noble, calm, and carefree feeling. There was a faint smile at the corner of his lips. I heard the zither sound, so I came. I wonder if I'm late? His voice was clear and melodious, with a hint of laziness. Wu Yao sized him up for a while, vaguely feeling that this aura was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't quite place it at the moment. At this moment, the sound of a zither was heard. The young man looked forward, his eyebrows raised slightly, and the smile at the corner of his lips deepened. You didn't disappoint me. Chu Luiyue suddenly noticed something as she looked up and looked over. When that face came into view, her heart skipped a beat, and she narrowed her eyes slightly. Senior Jing? She said the last two words meaningfully. Hearing this, the man immediately put his fist to his lips and coughed. Cough. Long time no see. It seems that you've recovered your memory? Chu Luiyue snorted. Wu Yao, why don't you invite Senior Jing in? Hearing this, Wu Yao suddenly remembered something, and he stared at the man in front of him with wide eyes. However, that person had already dusted his clothes and walked in. Everyone looked over, wondering who this peerless man who had suddenly appeared was. He didn't seem to care about these gazes, and in a few steps, he had already crossed the star path and arrived at the gate of the illusory god palace. Everyone was shocked. This person's strength was clearly above that of a god. And, he seemed to be even more unfathomable than the oracles. Before anyone could react, the man had already moved and appeared next to the chaotic holy jade. Chu Luiyue looked at him. Are you happy to hear me call you senior? Cough. It's just a joke, a joke. The man smiled and raised his hand. After all, I've helped you keep the music score for so many years. Even if I don't deserve credit, I've at least worked hard, right? It's just a small matter. Don't worry about it. Chu Luiyue twitched the corner of her lips. This music score was originally mine, but you said it was yours. How shameless. The man shrugged helplessly. In order to help you keep this music score, I deliberately left a soul in the god-slaying mound, waiting for tens of thousands of years. Isn't that enough? You know, we've only met twice before. If it were someone else, who would be willing to help me like this? Chu Luiyue ignored him. Back then, during the battle of the god-slaying mound, she knew that her life was in danger, so in a hurry, she had to divide the music score into 3 and give it to him to keep. That was the second time they met. The first time was in the southern border of Tianling, and the second time was in the god-slaying mound. It was only then that she found out that the black wall was the boundary between the plains. Because she knew that he wasn't from here, she made a bet and entrusted the music score to him. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. However, they were of the same generation and called each other friends, but he suddenly took advantage of the seniority. It was really, the evil spirit looked at the man in shock and anger. Who the hell are you? The man tidied up his clothes and smiled faintly, giving off an air of elegance. Changle Palace, Yunmukan, courtesy name Jingming. Chapter 2492. Changle Palace. It had never heard of this name before. However, from the conversation between the two, it was not difficult to deduce this person's background. After a moment, it suddenly thought of something. You're from the outside world? The outside world was naturally outside their plane. It was said that there were 3,000 planes in this world, and each plane had its own small world. There was a barrier between these planes, but it was extremely difficult to cross. Only the top powerhouses could do it. Although it knew this, because it had never been able to secure the position of Master God, it knew that it was untouchable, so it did not think about it. Who knew, this person actually came from the outside world. Then, he should have passed through the wall of the god-slaying tomb. Moreover, it was precisely because of his existence that Chu Luiyue was able to guard the zither score until today. Shengguan Jing was stunned when he heard this voice. Why did it, sound familiar? Right. When he first went to the god-slaying tomb, he had also heard this voice. At that time, he had also seen a totem on the wall. It was exactly the same as Chu Liuyue's bloodline totem. Unfortunately, he only took a quick glance and did not pay much attention to it. No wonder he found her totem familiar when he first saw it. All along, it was because she had deliberately left the zither score in the god-slaying tomb, and at the same time, left the mark of the totem there. Yun Mukin looked around. Where's your little attendant? Chu Luyue knew that he was asking about Chang Wanzhou. The 13 divine envoys had only heard his voice during the final battle in the god-slaying tomb, but they had never seen him in person. Chang Wanzhou was the only exception. At that time, she had brought Chang Wanzhou to Tianling on a whim and stayed in Nanjiang for a while. It was also then that she met this person. In short, no discord, no concord. At that time, she was the master god, and there were very few people who could fight with her. It was rare to meet someone, and they felt like old friends at first sight. Just like that, they became friends. Yun Mukin admired Chang Wanzhou very much. This was because whenever he encountered something, he would clean the house. He could even wipe the tables, chairs, and even the doorposts until they were shiny. Yun Mukin was a clean freak. He once took the initiative to bring it back, but was rejected by Chu Luyue. In the end, he could only leave with regret. Chu Luyue raised his eyes and looked at the entrance of the illusory shrine. In fact, Chang Wanzhou had arrived a long time ago, but he didn't come in. Little boat, come here. Chang Wanzhou bowed respectfully and walked over. The corners of Chu Liyue's lips lifted slightly. You wait by the side first. When the matter is over, clean up this place. Yes. Yun Muchen clicked his tongue and looked envious. Little you, As soon as these words were shouted, Yun Muchen instantly felt a chill coming from behind. He raised his eyebrows slightly and turned around to take a look. He met a pair of cold and noble eyes. Yun Muchen couldn't help but laugh. He retracted his gaze and continued. Little you, I'll bring a few people over later. Let little boat help me lead them. Chu Luyue looked at the evil spirit without looking sideways. I'm not free. Yun Muchen, this couple really knew how to turn their backs on one another. However, he also knew in his heart that now wasn't the time to be tangled up. Forget it, forget it. I'll think about it after all these things are settled. Thinking of this, he tactfully retreated. A sword pierced through the heart, the fire burned, and the endless energy of heaven and earth turned into the sound of a zither, surrounding it. This was a dead end. Chu Luyue stepped forward and looked at it condescendingly. It's a pity that you only have one life. Using one life to pay for all the grievances in the past was really letting it off easy. She raised her hand and was about to deliver the final blow. However, at this moment, the evil spirit suddenly looked up. It laughed, and its tone was strange and strange. Yueshan, you can't kill me. Chu Luyue ignored it and gathered divine power in her palm. Then, he heard it chuckle again, with endless viciousness and complacency, as it said word by word, it seems that you really don't know. I'll live with you. If I die, you can't live alone. If you live, I'll live forever. Yueshan, do you still want to kill me? A gloomy and hoarse voice came, and in an instant, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Chu Liyue's body suddenly stiffened. The vast divine power was still surging in her palm, but it didn't fall. Her pupils shrank, and she looked at the pair of scarlet eyes in disbelief. What, did you say? Live, die together. The evil spirit laughed even more wildly and raised its voice. The emperor knows about this. The two high priests know. Only, you don't know. Why do you think the high priest and the others chose to take a step back when they clearly had the chance to take me down with them in the god-slaying mound? They only dismembered my body and sealed it in different parts of the god-slaying mound? Why do you think they were willing to sign the contract and be trapped in the Red Moon Desert for 10,000 years and suffer loneliness and loneliness? Do you think that by killing me, you can regain the position of the Divine Master and the world will be at peace? Yueshan, you are too real. Every word, every sentence, was like a sharp knife stabbing at Chu Liuyue's heart. It was a heart-wrenching pain. Chu Liuyue's body seemed to be numb. She trembled slightly, but she couldn't feel anything anymore. Only her internal organs seemed to be crazily squeezed by an invisible force. In an instant, there seemed to be countless invisible wounds in her body. She couldn't touch them, and she couldn't even tell exactly where it hurt. But she could only endure it like this. She slowly turned around and looked at the few figures in front of the main hall from afar. Dugu Mabao's expression didn't change. He only looked at her with eyes that were as deep as the sea. Lan Zhao's lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something, but he remained silent in the end. Go and ask. Just so that you can be reincarnated again after 10,000 years. How did they beg me back then? It was as if a cold wind suddenly poured into her chest, and it was cold and piercing. Chu Liuyue's vision suddenly blurred. The divine power on her fingertips dissipated. At this moment, it seemed as if all the strength in her body had been sucked away. Endless fatigue surged and almost drowned her. Ask? Is there a need to ask? She pressed her heart tightly, but it was still difficult for her to breathe. There's no need to ask. She knew their temperament the best. Such proud, arrogant people. In order to keep her soul, in order to let her be reincarnated, in order to let her return, in order to let her, what have they done? She thought of the yellow sand that filled the sky in the Red Moon Desert and the cage under the lake that couldn't see the light of day. She thought of Debao's shyness and embarrassment when he forcefully refined his divine body and turned into a child in order to save her. She thought of Lan Zhao standing by the lake and happily changing his appearance every day, but he always said that his original appearance was the best. She thought of Diwu Zhangze always coming out to smooth things over when she was exhausted and persuading Debao to let her rest. There was no wind more lonely and rough than the Red Moon Desert. It crushed and blew away all the pride and dignity. Chapter 2493. Diwu Zhangze and the others had just arrived at the heavenly gate when they clearly heard these heart-wrenching words. Yu Jiu and Mu Hongyu were both stunned. Then, they slowly turned their heads and looked at Diwu Zhangze. He clenched his fists, and his expression turned cold. Yu Jiu, cut the bridge. Yu Jiu was stunned. What? Diwu Zhangze suddenly looked at him and said in a low voice, I said, cut the bridge and close the door. Yu Jiu finally understood that he was talking about the bridge outside that connected to the illusionary god ocean. But, hurry. Diwu Zhangze didn't give any explanation and hurriedly urged. At this moment, an inch-long stream of green light suddenly floated in front of Yu Jiu. A line of words gradually appeared. Yu Jiu was slightly shocked. Big Brother actually sent the same order as Diwu Zhangze. He pursed his lips and no longer hesitated. He turned around, raised his sword, and slashed down fiercely. The sword fell, and sparks instantly flew on the silver bridge. Countless Xian formations appeared, but after meeting the green sword energy, they were quickly annihilated. This sword was personally refined by Cun Yi, and it was extremely powerful. Even if this silver bridge was formed by countless Xian formations, when the two met, it was still as easy as crushing dry weeds. Below, the waves seemed to be surging even more violently. Yu Jiu mobilized all the power in his body and desperately cut it. Finally, he heard an explosion. The last Xian formation connected to the heavenly gate was also cut. Just this sword had almost exhausted all the divine power in Yu Jiu's body. Diwu Zhangze quickly looked at Wu Yao. At this moment, Wu Yao also received Cun Yi's order and immediately closed the door without hesitation. Creak, the heavenly gate closed. Some people hurriedly looked back but quickly retracted their gazes. At this moment, their attention was all on the illusionary god palace. To be precise, it was on that woman. Chu Liyue's throat was dry, and she almost couldn't breathe. Her lips moved, and she asked softly, in other words, in these 10,000 years, they can't refine their divine bodies or take a step out of the Red Moon Desert, then, Wei Yu is just monitoring them. The evil spirit sneered. Unfortunately, they still couldn't abide by the contract. From the day the high priestess privately refined her divine body, the contract was already invalid. Chu Liyue stared ahead, but his vision was blurry. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, but she was exhausted. In the end, she still fell back down. So, you brought them back to the illusory god palace in advance? Let them suffer all kinds of torture. This is what they deserve. In these 10,000 years, they violated the contract and brought you to the Red Moon Desert to cultivate. They also secretly saved you several times. Do they really think I don't know? Lan Xiao finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Don't talk as if you're so noble. During this period of time, if it weren't for you repeatedly making a move and vainly attempting to seize the zither score with insidious means, how could we have made a move to counterattack? Chu Liyue closed his eyes. I see, so that was how it was. Today's battle between the two of us will not determine victory or defeat. If you want the position of Divine Master, go ahead and take it back. However, if you want my life, can you do it? The evil spirit's voice was evil and arrogant. If Chu Liyue wanted to kill it, he would also die. In this world, no one could easily make such a decision. Thus, it was certain that in today's battle, even if it couldn't win, it definitely wouldn't lose. However, at this moment, a deep and cold voice suddenly came from the main hall of the illusory god palace. She can't, but I can. This voice carried the might of thunder and reverberated in all directions. Chu Liyue suddenly raised his eyes. He saw Rong Xiu pointing at him with a long sword in his hand. That sword was completely black, with only a line of brilliant gold in the middle that shone with resplendent light. Boundless pressure suddenly descended upon them. Everyone was stunned on the spot. What did the emperor mean? He wanted to kill the evil spirit? But wouldn't that kill Chu Liyue as well? Jun Zhuqing's heart jumped as he looked at Lan Xiao. You're crazy. Who was he going to kill? Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes. What, you want to rely on your gu refinement technique? Jun Zhuqing's pupils shrunk. So you do know. Rong Xiu looked at him coldly. You can try. Jun Zhuqing gritted his teeth and suddenly took out a black hammer. Chu Liyue looked at it and immediately recognized that it was the hammer that Wei Zhe used back then. However, it looked different from before as there were many blood-red patterns on it. It looked eerie and cold. At the next moment, Jun Zhuqing injected a trace of divine power and the blood-red patterns on it seemed to come alive as they swam back and forth. At this moment, the evil spirit suddenly shouted angrily. Jun Zhuqing! You dare to betray me! Around its body, blood-red patterns also appeared, and they were twisting crazily. One could vaguely hear countless shrill screams coming from within. The evil spirit's aura was shrinking continuously. Jun Zhuqing said. If I can't kill him, I can use his soul as a guide and devour his blood to refine gu to form a prison. When he had just returned to the main hall of the illusory god palace, he had secretly left this method behind. As long as, bam bam bam. Before Jun Zhuqing could finish his words, a series of explosions could be heard. The blood-red patterns that were twisting around the evil spirit suddenly shattered. Jun Zhuqing's expression changed. At the next moment, a cold and violent force swept over. He immediately threw out the thing in his hand. Boom! Everything vanished into thin air. To think that I chose you as the successor of the high priest back then and summoned your soul back 10,000 years later. Junjiuqing, this is how you repay me. The evil spirit was flustered and exasperated. Evidently, Junjiuqing's actions made it extremely angry and hateful. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something and stared at Junjiuqing. Yi Xiang? Family Yi's ancestor. But didn't he follow the evil spirit back then? Now, Junjiuqing's expression was gloomy. This situation was probably unsolvable. Was Rongxiu really going to kill her as well? The evil spirit sneered and gritted its teeth as it questioned coldly. Emperor, are you going to interfere with the matter of the illusory god palace? Rongxiu's gaze was cold. I have already taken action 10,000 years ago, what difference is there in today's battle? His words were like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. What did you say? The evil spirit was shocked, then it suddenly remembered something and looked at the burned name on the myriad god record. You, before it could say a word, Rongxiu's sword had already arrived. Extremely fast. Extremely accurate. Extremely ruthless. Chu Luiyue only saw a bright light flash before her eyes. At the next moment, a painful groan could be heard from behind her. The sword energy brushed past her ear, and her hair fluttered lightly before falling back down. She looked back. The evil spirit's body had already started to burn and curl up at a speed visible to the naked eye. She looked at her surroundings and saw that it was calm. It seemed that she wasn't affected at all. The evil spirit was obviously shocked by the scene in front of it. It suddenly opened its eyes wide. You cut off the life between us. How is that possible? For 10,000 years, you have never entered the main hall of the illusory god palace. However, the only one who could do this was the celestial emperor alone. Suddenly, it trembled. Whose hand did you borrow? Rongxiu's thin lips curled up slightly, but his gaze was as cold as a glacier that wouldn't melt for 10,000 years. He said indifferently. The day you sent Mu Qinghe to Tianling, I erased his memory. Chapter 2494. In the sky, the clouds gathered and dispersed. A wind blew past, bringing with it the faint smell of blood that lingered at the tip of the nose. There was no sound. At this moment, the scene seemed to have frozen. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Rongxiu's words echoed in her ears. Over and over again. He said. On the day Mu Qinghe was sent to Tianling by the evil spirit, he erased his memory. Then, it was as if something had smashed heavily on her heart, causing a dull pain. She slowly turned around and looked at Mu Qinghe. He knelt on the ground, covered in wounds and almost dead. As if sensing her gaze, his body moved, and then he raised his head with difficulty and looked over. His face was pale and messily stained with a few streaks of blood. That pair of cold and indifferent eyes seemed to have a layer of ice gradually melting, revealing a bit of light. Then, he looked at her and smiled. He was in such a sorry state, but his eyes were warm. Just like the first time they met. The only difference from that time was that his smile was extremely shallow and full of timidity, concealing his nervousness and fear. Now, the corners of his lips were relaxed, and he was so frank and relieved. There was a riot in the palace of the illusory god, and the two sides were in conflict. He was sent to Tianling to wait for an opportunity to snatch the zither score. But no one knew that the emperor, who was supposed to be alone, secretly made a move and changed everything. Chu Luiyue's mind was in a mess. When did you recover your memory? Mu Qinghe paused. A few days before Her Highness' accident. The evil spirit suddenly spoke with a sharp and crazy voice. No. Even if her life was cut off, at least one of them should have died. I was fine in the palace of the illusory god for 10,000 years, so, she should be the one who died. She is indeed dead. Rongxiu's expression was indifferent. At the foot of Thousand Wine Mountain, after you used private means to awaken her memory in the palace of the illusory god in advance, I also erased all her memories except for Tianling and sent her back to Tianling. At that time, Chu Luyue had just broken through to the high god realm. Because he entered the myriad Wine Mountain, he was forcibly awakened from his memories in the illusion god palace. Under those circumstances, she would definitely die if she faced it. Thus, he chose to start over. It was also a good opportunity to sever the connection between the two of them. The evil spirit stared blankly for a long time before it finally came to a realization. So that's how it is. That's how it is. It was you who helped her escape and enter the cycle of reincarnation. It was you who did everything you could to find a way out for her. Let me think. When did you make your move? You had already interfered in the battle 10,000 years ago, right? Were you the one who protected the 13 divine envoys and sent them to Tianling? Even the attendants that she is most comfortable with have not been left behind. Not only that, haha. Celestial Emperor, you've calculated well. You've even schemed against Mu Qinghe. After she returned to Tianling, you had Mu Qinghe help her die and change her life. In these 10,000 years, everyone and everything was under your control. You've really calculated everything. Ha! The hoarse and sharp voice echoed in the sky above the illusion god palace, clearly falling into everyone's ears. Other than this voice, everyone else was deathly silent. These words and these things were far beyond their imagination. It took a long time for them to regain their senses. Chu Luyue was in a daze. Countless scenes appeared and intertwined in her mind. It was as if there was a thread that finally connected the fragments into a complete story. The questions that had troubled her for a long time were finally dispelled at this time, and she found the final answer. Mu Qinghe looked at her deeply and chuckled softly. Actually, at that time, he had recovered his memories very suddenly. He only understood later that the Celestial Emperor had done it on purpose. He was sure that he would make the choice he wanted at the last moment. Of course, the result was indeed so. He sat quietly in his room for 3 days. In the end, on that day, he intercepted her calls for help 3 times and ended her life in Tianling. He helped Rongxiu cross the sky and sea to find a way out for her. He also brought Rongxiu's power into the illusion god palace and cut off her life force with the evil spirit. It was also after that he beat her at her own game and went to Mo Shiqian, who had also had a part of his memory erased, and pretended that nothing had happened. Mu Qinghe's breath gradually weakened, and even his vision blurred. If he confessed all of this publicly, the evil spirit naturally had a way to kill him. But he was already prepared. He tried hard to open his eyes, wanting to see her face again. Unfortunately, the blood fell and merged into his eyes, and he could not see clearly. After a long time, he chuckled softly. Your Highness, you're right. I am indeed a traitor. In my life, I only chose to betray another person for you. Your Highness. He spoke softly, his voice hoarse. Back then, I really didn't know how to write the word you. His voice gradually dissipated in the wind. Large patches of blood spread out beneath his body. Hong Yao suddenly flew over and leaned on his shoulder. Its claws grabbed his clothes tightly, and big drops of tears fell. But finally, all sounds were annihilated. However, his eyes were still staring at her in a daze. Hong Yao leaned against him and finally stopped moving. Only the last tear hung at the corner of its eye and did not fall for a long time. The evil spirit muttered, and its laughter became strange. You are the Emperor. Who in this world can calculate better than you? Unfortunately, Rongxiu. As the Emperor, you have already betrayed the heavenly Tao for your own selfish interests. Today, you won't be able to escape the punishment of the heavenly Tao. Chu Luyue was shocked. Rongxiu's thin scarlet lips curled up slightly in a faint smile. I entered the Illusion God Palace today with no intention of leaving alive. Chapter 2495. His low and pleasant voice sounded so calm and collected. It was as if he was talking about an insignificant matter. Chu Liuyue's heart was beating like a drum. Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at her. His eyes were thick and clear, and they reflected her figure. Rong Xiu. You are the Celestial Emperor, and you have controlled the gods of the human world for tens of thousands of years. How high and mighty you are. Unparalleled. But now, you want to bury all of this with your own hands just for her. You're crazy. You're crazy. The evil spirit's shrill voice sounded. It was extremely ear-piercing. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly felt like it was being tightly grasped by something. However, Rong Xiu's face didn't change at all. The next moment, he raised his hand and clenched it. Boom! A ball of golden and black flames suddenly surged out of the sword and completely burned the evil spirit. You will regret it. You will regret. The flames burned silently. The voice finally dissipated gradually. There was dead silence inside and outside the illusory god palace. Chu Liyue was stunned. Her mind went blank for a moment. Then, she suddenly remembered that when she met Jun Jiuqing again in the illusory god palace, he said that Rong Xiu was crazy. At that time, she only thought that he said it afterward. Who would have thought that today would come? The moment she knew that he was the Celestial Emperor, she knew that this man must have schemed against her a lot. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately sealed her memory in the Black Pyramid and hidden it from her for so long. Illusory God Palace. Divine Ruins World. Tianling. Yao Chen. He had followed her all the way. Even though she had gone through several life and death situations, he was still unwilling to let go. Since 10,000 years ago, he had already betrayed the heavenly Tao and predicted today's calamity. He had also calculated his own life and death. If such a person wasn't crazy, what was he? At this moment, the evil spirit's last breath was cut off. A brilliant light suddenly appeared in the sky. Chu Liyue looked up. Above the dark sky, a ray of light gushed out from behind the clouds and gradually dissipated. The streams of light crisscrossed with each other, outlining complicated and mysterious patterns. In the end, they formed a huge astrolabe. The light it emitted was divine and dazzling, making it almost impossible for people to look directly at it. They subconsciously felt reverence and submission. An indescribable aura of a nine heavens supreme fell from the sky. Plop. Outside the illusory god palace, there were already people who couldn't withstand the pressure and aura, kneeling on the ground in reverence. The supreme of the heavenly Tao. All living beings in the world bowed their heads before him. With the first, there was soon a second, a third. Soon, outside the illusory god palace, a large group of people knelt down. Similar scenes were happening all over the human world. Peach Blossom Dock. Within the Yu residence, Lin Qifei was currently researching a profound formation in his room. The sky outside suddenly brightened, and then sounds of discussion could be heard. He stood up in surprise and pushed open the door. Only then did he see that many people had already gathered in the courtyard. At this moment, they were all looking up at the sky with shock and awe. Lin Qifei looked up curiously. There was a profound formation in the sky all of a sudden. No. That wasn't a profound formation. Streams of light flashed on it, and the astrolabe's layout was perfect. It was as if it was embedded in this world. This was, the heavenly Tao was descending. At this moment, a stream of light flowed. A powerful aura descended, and everyone in the courtyard knelt on the ground. The light was so bright that people couldn't look directly at it. Suddenly, a huge mirror slowly appeared. Doubts instantly appeared in everyone's minds. Is this is the world shaking? Tianling Dynasty, Imperial Capital. Zhao Yu Hall. Shengguan Yu stood under the porch with his hands behind his back. Sigh. I wonder when you, will come back to visit, he muttered. Suddenly, a stream of light appeared in the sky. He frowned slightly and looked up, only to see an astrolabe floating quietly in the air. The aura descended, and he felt a weight on his shoulders. At the same time, a mirror appeared in the sky. His expression changed slightly. This is, for some reason, he suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. Bright dawn. On the streets, there was a hubbub of voices. At a certain moment, the sky changed. Look! What's going on? Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Everyone raised their heads and looked towards the source of the voice. However, they felt that the pressure was extremely heavy. It was truly unbearable. Soon, the crowd fell to their knees, their hearts full of shock and awe. A mirror also appeared in the sky above. The heavenly path descended with supreme aura. It covered the entire world. Mountains, rivers, forests, deserts, countless creatures and every corner were covered by the heavenly path's aura. At the same time, mirrors appeared one after another. A beam of light suddenly descended from the sky and swept across these mirrors, reflecting a dazzling light. Soon, the light fell on the mirror in the Peach Blossom Dock's door realm. In an instant, tiny ripples spread out like water waves. That beautiful face became clearer, and gradually, even her entire figure became clearer. In an instant, the astrolabe shone brightly. Illusory God Palace. The dazzling light fell from the sky and fell on Rongxiao. However, the light did not stop on him. Instead, it continued to move and finally, came to Chu Liuyue's eyes. Looking at the approaching light, Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She instinctively felt something was wrong and wanted to retreat. However, the aura had already overturned her body and she could not move at all. In the next moment, the light finally fell on her body. In an instant, Chu Liyue felt as if a pair of extremely sharp eyes swept across her body. From the inside to the outside, he saw her clearly and thoroughly. Rongxiao. A voice filled with vicissitudes of life came from the heavens and instantly spread throughout the world. Do you admit your mistake? Rongxiao's expression did not change. I know. She was just a peach blossom born in the chaos 100,000 years ago. You carefully took care of her for 90,000 years and finally guided her soul into her body and helped her become the master of the illusory God Palace. I know all of this and had no intention of interfering. However, she was born with the evil spirit and could not be tolerated by heaven and earth, but you kept her alive until today. 10,000 years ago, I ordered you to kill her, but you guided the evil spirit into your body and separated her from the evil spirit. You also took advantage of the evil spirit and sent her into the cycle of reincarnation. After the incident, I left 3,000 mirrors in the world to search for her whereabouts, but there was no result. Only now do I know that you have already stolen the sky and replaced her. You burned her name in the Pantheon record and sent her into the second cycle of reincarnation without permission. Rongxiao, do you admit to all of this? Rongxiao raised his chin slightly and said, I admit. Back then, you cut off the life force between her and the evil spirit, but in order to send her into the second cycle of reincarnation, you directly cut off half of your divine meridians and gave her a new life force. Now, although the evil spirit is dead, your divine meridians are half destroyed and you have lost the qualifications of an imperial emperor. Do you regret it? The might of the heavenly Tao was overwhelming. Rongxiao's lips curved slightly and his eyes were clear. I don't regret it. Chapter 2496. He knew his mistake. He admitted his guilt. But he said that he did not regret it. The surroundings were silent. Only a gentle breeze could be heard. Chu Luyue suddenly felt that the light that enveloped her was too dazzling. It was so dazzling that it hurt her eyes. At this moment, she actually felt a little timid. She did not dare to listen anymore. He had done so much for her, but she did not know at all. But he was her husband. He was the person she had promised to spend the rest of her life with. How could she not know anything? She did not even notice it at all. Rong Xiu, your divine meridians are damaged. You have committed many crimes. Now, you should be punished. That ancient and distant voice reverberated between the heavens and the earth. The huge astrolabe started to rotate slowly. A light curtain fell from the sky and trapped Rong Xiu within it. He raised his head slightly. There was no regret or fear in his eyes. I will accept all the punishments. As soon as he finished speaking, a stream of light flew out from the astrolabe. It transformed into a sharp arrow and shot toward Rong Xiu at an incomparably fast speed. Chi! That sharp arrow pierced through his left knee. In an instant, the sharp arrow was annihilated. Blood splattered everywhere. His bones were shattered. Roar! Shui leaped and pounced over. However, before it could get close to the light curtain, it was blocked by an extremely powerful pressure. It was easily knocked to the ground. It got up and charged forward again. Then, its body was thrown out again. A trail of blood appeared on the ground. Rong Xiu looked at it. Shui, go back. Shui refused. It whimpered and charged forward. Soon, its body was stained with blood. Chi! A second arrow flew over. This time, it was his right knee. The bones in both his knees were broken. The pressure of the heavenly Tao descended and pressed down on his body. Plop! With a muffled sound, the tall figure knelt on the ground. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to have been shaken by something. Her heart was trembling. Since you have admitted your mistake, kneel in front of thousands of people. Return all of your divine power to me. As soon as he finished speaking, the third arrow pierced through Rong Xiu's chest. His body shook, and he finally spat out a mouthful of blood. Rong Xiu! Chu Liyue quickly ran in his direction. When Shui heard her, she turned around and ran over. She ran around her feet and whimpered. The closer he got, the thicker and heavier the heavenly Tao pressure became. Every step forward consumed more strength and spirit than the previous one. Her speed gradually slowed down, and in the end, she stopped outside the light screen, unable to get any closer. She was only a few steps away from him, but she was so far away that she couldn't touch him. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be on fire. From the moment she saw Rong Xiu kneel down, the last string in her mind snapped. He was so noble and proud. How could he kneel like this? How many people in the world were watching this scene? She pressed her hand on the light screen. Under her palm, it was burning hot and stinging. However, this couldn't compare to the pain in her heart. She opened her mouth and wanted to speak, but she couldn't make a sound. Her chest was stuffy and painful, and even breathing became painful. The pain spread from his heart to every inch of his body, every part of his body. She couldn't break free. Rong Xiu supported himself with one hand and coughed, then slowly straightened up. Although he was kneeling, his posture was straight, as if he would never bend. He raised his hand and wiped away the dark red blood from the corner of his mouth. Then, he turned to look at her. He chuckled. It's just kneeling. It's no big deal. Back in Yaochen, he had also knelt in order to marry her. Chu Liyue's eyes were red, and hot tears finally fell. Rong Xiu frowned slightly and smiled helplessly. Don't cry. I can't help you wipe your tears now. Just as he finished speaking, another sharp arrow pierced through his left shoulder. A few drops of blood splattered on the light screen and landed in front of her eyes. They were quickly burned clean by the terrifying power on the light screen. She almost felt as if the blood had landed on her face and body. It was hot and painful. She opened her eyes and looked at him, but her tears fell even more fiercely. Rong Xiu's gaze was gentle. He suddenly thought of something and asked softly, are you angry that I lied to you? He paused for a moment and wiped away the blood that flowed out from the corner of his lips before continuing. You should be angry. His eyes became deeper, as if he was recalling something. However, two small shadows of her were clearly reflected in the depths of his eyes. After a moment, he said gently, in Yaochen, when you woke up in the forest, I lied to you and said that you trespassed on someone else's territory. In Tianling, when you accidentally said that you would surpass me on the azure cloud roll next time, I lied to you and said that I had never heard of this place. In Peach Blossom Dock, when you asked me if I recognized the armillary shield, I lied to you and said that I didn't. King Li, the son of God. These identities were all lies. Even the identity of the first master was hidden from you for many years. I only told you a few days ago. Rong Xiu said word by word as he recounted the past. Actually, how could he count it all? From the beginning, he had lied to her. When he told a lie, he had to cover it up with countless lies. More and more streams of light turned into sharp arrows that pierced through his body and were annihilated. All that was left were wounds and bloodstains. He was wearing a black robe, and the bloodstains on it were not obvious. However, gradually, as the blood increased, it wet his clothes bit by bit. His face became pale, and his breath became weaker and weaker. Tens of thousands of years of divine power was being extracted one by one. This kind of pain was no different from being skinned alive and cut into pieces. He gently exhaled, and a thick blood aura spread out. But, at that time, I said that I was Rong Xiu, and I didn't lie to you. I begged to marry you no matter what, and I didn't lie to you. I said that I waited for you for a long time, and I didn't lie to you. I said that marrying you as my wife was a blessing of 3 lifetimes, and I didn't lie to you. Chi. A sharp arrow suddenly pierced towards his heart from the back. The huge impact made his body tremble, and he barely supported himself with one hand. The ground in front of him was also covered in sticky and sweet blood. On the back of his hand, blue veins could be faintly seen. Chu Luiyue slowly slid down to kneel down. Separated by a light screen, they looked at each other from afar. He took a deep breath and subconsciously raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. However, he was shocked to find that there were several wounds on the back of his hand, and blood was flowing out. Tens of thousands of arrows had taken away his divine power for the past 100,000 years. Only the last bit of divine power left quietly dissipated with these bloody wounds. He looked at it in a daze, and then put his hand down again. Forget it. He raised his eyes and looked at her deeply, as if he wanted to engrave her appearance deeply. I know that my hates it when people lie to her. But this time, don't be angry, okay? Chu Luiyue bit her lips tightly, and a sweet and fishy taste filled her mouth. She looked at him and suddenly smiled. Hot tears kept falling down her cheeks. Yes, I hate it when people lie to me. But, Rong Xiu, if the person who lied to me is you, then it's okay. What did you lie to me about? My body, my heart, they all belong to you. What else do you want? You lied to me to believe you, lied to me to love you, lied to me to be jealous of you, lied to me to be unable to sleep because of you, lied to me to live and die with you, lied to me to follow you to the heavens and the underworld? If that's the case, then you'll lie to me for a lifetime, okay? Chapter 2497. Her voice was very soft, but also very heavy. She handed over all her trust and love to him in such a straightforward manner. Chu Luiyue thought that there was probably no one in this world who was better at deceiving others than her. Rong Xiao, you said before that you came here with the intention of dying today. You lied to me, didn't you? She looked at him, her eyes flickering with fragmentary light, with an extremely humble expectation and desire that even she herself did not notice. Rong Xiao's lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard an ancient and distant voice with endless pressure. As the emperor, Rong Xiao should uphold justice, but for his own selfish desires, he went against the heavenly Tao. Today, he must die. However, you don't have to worry. After he dies, the next one will be you. Rong Xiao's expression suddenly changed, and he looked up abruptly. She has already cut off her life with the evil spirit, and everything that happened here was caused by me alone. Why implicate her? Rong Xiao, at this point, you still want to protect her? Don't forget, 10,000 years ago, I already ordered you to kill her. You've already pushed back her lifespan by over 10,000 years. Could it be that this isn't enough? Today, both you and her will die. Every word was resolute and could not be disobeyed. Rong Xiao's hand slowly tightened. Today, he took the initiative to die, in order to leave her a way out. But, now, it seemed that it was impossible. A dark light flashed across his eyes. At this moment, on the light screen, a stream of light suddenly turned into a sharp arrow, piercing towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue knew that it was not good, but under the pressure of the heavenly Tao, there was no time to retreat. In a hurry, she used all the strength in her body to dodge to the side. Chi! That sharp arrow brushed past her neck, narrowly missing her. A bloodstain instantly appeared on her slender and fair neck. The dark red bloodstain was reflected in Rong Xiao's eyes, and it was like a spark that set the prairie ablaze. Soon after, flames began to burn in the depths of their deep eyes. One was black and the other was bright gold. An extremely terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body. Chu Luiyue was shocked. She looked over and met his extremely cold eyes. Boom! The black and gold flames instantly surged out of Rong Xiao's body and overturned him. Her heart sank. Rong Xiao! The messy bloodstains were quickly burned away, and the broken bones and cracked wounds were also rapidly regenerated under the burning of the flames. Everyone was shocked by this sudden change of events. Countless pairs of eyes looked at this scene, unable to regain their senses for a long time. However, Yun Mukin suddenly narrowed his eyes. Huh! This is... The flames burned fiercely, and Rong Xiao's figure gradually blurred. However, the aura that was constantly spreading from his body was still rising crazily. Crack! A cracking sound was heard. It was the powerful light curtain that was affected by this power and instantly shattered. Chu Luiyue was shocked. The next moment, she saw the black and gold flames quickly condense into a sword. Rong Xiao's figure came into her sight again. His black brocade robe was tattered, but the bloodstains on it seemed to have been burned clean. The body under the robe was tall and straight, and all the injuries had disappeared. Swoosh! He waved his wrist, and the sword instantly cut through the space. The hand that held the sword also recovered to its original state. It was strong, and the joints were distinct. There were no more fine wounds. The most different thing was his eyes. Those deep and clear eyes were now completely occupied by the two balls of flames. Just one look at them was enough to make people unconsciously submit. Compared to the power of the Way of Heaven, it was actually not inferior. A ridiculous and bold idea suddenly came to Chu Luiyue's mind. Rong Xiao had broken through. He stared at her and then walked toward her. Without the light curtain, the two of them were only a few steps apart. He came to her and reached out his hand. Chu Luiyue did not think and reached out her hand. He used his long arm to pull her up easily and took her into his arms. Without any rest or hesitation, he held the sword with one hand and held her slender waist with the other. He bent down and kissed her fiercely. This kiss was deep and long. After a long time, when she almost could not stand, he finally stopped. He tilted his head slightly and sucked away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Chu Liuyue's heart swelled with jealousy. The joy and sadness of regaining what she had lost swallowed her. She leaned into his arms, and her hands clutched his clothes tightly. Feeling the warmth under his clothes and his strong heartbeat, her heart finally calmed down gradually. Rongxiu. Rongxiu, he kissed her eyebrows. His voice was low and gentle, as if he was afraid of disturbing her. However, every word and sentence seemed to be suppressing the insanity in his bones. I've calculated everything and waited for 10,000 years before I stole a lifetime to be your husband. Now that the heavens want to kill you, I'll crush the clouds and go against the heavens. As his voice fell, he let go of her. With a tap of his foot, he soared into the sky. He floated in the air, holding a black gold sword, and his clothes fluttered. The next moment, he pointed his sword to the sky. His fighting spirit was clear. That ancient and distant voice was tinged with a trace of anger. Rongxiu, how dare you? Rongxiu smiled coldly. Whether I dare or not, you'll know soon. Since he followed the way of heaven and was punished, he could not exchange her life. Then, there was no need to endure any more. A gust of wind blew. Suddenly, a puzzled voice came from the crowd. What's that? Chu Liyue looked up. A peach blossom drifted over with the wind from afar. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this, a peach blossom from the ruined garden? At this moment, the peach blossom drifted in front of Rongxiu and landed silently on his sword. The pinkish-white color quickly faded, revealing the intertwining dark and bright gold inside. Swish! At the moment of contact, the peach blossom turned into a cluster of flames and merged with the sword. Then, a second, a third, countless peach blossoms drifted in the air and scattered in half of the sky. Under the dazzling light, blood and qi surged and peach blossoms drifted down. This scene was like a dream. It was so unreal. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes slightly. When the last peach blossom landed on Rongxiu's sword, she closed her eyes. The sound of the wind in her ears suddenly stopped. Rongxiu slashed down with his sword. The boundless sword intent of the dark and bright gold intertwined and crisscrossed, breaking through the sky. At the same time, the mirror in the peach blossom dock's gate suddenly shattered. Crash! The same scene happened everywhere in the human world. The 3,000 mirrors left by the heavenly axiom were all broken at this moment. Illusionary God Ocean. The dark and turbulent sea suddenly condensed and turned into endless snow in the blink of an eye. Then, the snow seemed to be summoned by some kind of power and flew toward the heavenly gate. A faint cyan barrier suddenly appeared. The ice and snow melted instantly upon contact. Boom! As the sword fell, a crack appeared on the astrolabe. Then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to crazily rush toward the crack. However, at this moment, Chu Liyue opened her eyes. In an instant, streaks of green flowing light appeared everywhere in the illusionary god palace. That was, a barrier. Furthermore, this wasn't just a simple barrier. It was the result of countless barriers intersecting and fusing with one another. The huge illusionary god palace was completely covered by this barrier. A fog-like green barrier appeared in front of Chu Liyue's eyes. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly, then raised her hand and tapped lightly. Fall. This low chant instantly spread across the entire world. After a short period of silence, a pure white snowflake suddenly floated down from the sky. Wherever the snowflake passed, space and energy froze. The green barrier covered the entire illusionary god palace. Soon, Countless snowflakes fell and occupied every inch of the mountains, rivers, and plants. Unable to absorb the energy of heaven and earth, the crack on the astrolabe could not be repaired. Rong Xiao slashed again. Crack. The astrolabe was completely shattered. In an instant, the dazzling flowing light on the astrolabe dimmed. At the same time, the terrifying heavenly axiom's pressure also dissipated. Rong Xiao's low and majestic voice was transmitted to the ears of millions of people in the world at this moment. The past is the past. Today's battle will let bygones be bygones. From now on, we will not interfere with each other's business and live in peace. If you attack again and hurt my wife, Rong Xiao will definitely risk my life to accompany you. With that, he flicked his wrist, and a sword flew into the shattered astrolabe. Boom! The flames burned fiercely. Chu Luiyue raised her head and glanced at it. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and her eyes curved. I forgot to say something. Even if he is an emperor, he will still have to marry me and become my husband. At this point, the last flame burned out. The dark clouds gradually dispersed, and the sky became clear. All the violent energy gradually calmed down, and everything returned to normal. The green barrier faded bit by bit, leaving only the falling snowflakes. Rong Xiao moved and returned to her side. He was about to speak when Chu Luiyue suddenly stepped forward and grabbed his hand. Follow me. With that, she pulled him in a certain direction. Cini, I'll leave this place to you. Chu Luiyue's voice came from afar. The void rippled, and Cini's figure appeared in front of the chaos holy jade. He placed a hand on his left chest and nodded respectfully. Yes. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao walked side by side at a leisurely pace. A thin layer of snow quickly covered the path of the illusory god palace. After a few turns, the two arrived at a courtyard. The door was tightly shut, but several black branches extended from the top of the wall. There was no sign. After the chaos 10,000 years ago, this place only had a vague name, abandoned garden. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiao with her starry eyes. Let's go in and take a look. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, stepped forward, and pushed open the door. He chuckled. I've taken care of this place for 10,000 years. I'm most familiar with it. Creak. The moment the door opened, Rong Xiao's voice suddenly stopped. Large swathes of peach trees grew in the garden, stretching as far as the eye could see. But at this moment, the peach trees that had withered for 10,000 years were blooming with pinkish-white peach blossoms. Translucent white snow drifted down one after another, covering the ground with a layer of white. White snow was also piled up on the spreading branches and clusters of peach blossoms. He stood there in a daze for a long time. It had been far too long since he had seen such a scene. Chu Luiyue came to his side, tilted her head, and smiled. Your Highness, you said you've seen it before. Snow dancing in the sky and peach blossoms shining brightly. Now, I've seen it too. She turned her gaze slightly and looked forward. There seemed to be flowing light in her eyes. It's indeed very beautiful. Rong Xiao looked at her exquisite side profile and said, It is very beautiful. Then, he suddenly closed the door behind him. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Before she could say anything, she was pulled inside. Soon, her back was pressed against the trunk of a blossoming peach tree. He wrapped one hand around her waist, supporting her from behind. His other hand held her chin, and he kissed her. His kiss was very hurried, his breath hot, and his breathing gradually quickened. She almost melted into spring water, melting in his arms. Then, his hand stroked her waist. But in the next moment, a soft, boneless hand suddenly pressed down on his hand. He looked at her, his voice especially low and hoarse. Her face was dyed with a bit of crimson, her starry eyes were even more dazzling, and her full and soft lips were moist and sweet. Just a glance made him feel even hotter. He leaned closer and bit her white and tender earlobe. Her body went limp, and her arms wrapped around his neck. She leaned into his arms, as if this was the only way she could rely on him. But she still shook her head. No. Then, she slightly raised her head, moved closer to his ear, and said softly with a red face. I think I have. Rong Xiu's body stiffened, and he finally stopped moving. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the person in his arms. She was looking at him eagerly, but there was a hint of ridicule in her eyes, as if she was waiting for a good show. He narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and finally kissed her lips, carefully holding her in his arms. Snowflakes fell, and the blooming peach blossoms swayed gently in the breeze. There was a faint sound of human voices. When did it happen? About, more than a month. Then it's time to prepare. What name should we give her? Think about it. No, you should name our daughter. How do you know it's a daughter? It must be. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.